Chapter 457. Ji Dong soaked in the river for 10 minutes in one breath. He managed to avoid suffocation by relying on his strong inner breath and magical powers. Amidst the splashing sounds, he popped his head out of the water and panted heavily. With the help of the suffocating feeling, he gradually calmed down. A bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ji Dong was actually glad that only he and Chun Sichuan came out this time. If there were other companions, the scene before him would have been so embarrassing. However, if he did not leave immediately, he was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and push Chun Sichuan down. Self-control was something that varied from person to person. In front of ordinary girls, men would more or less have a certain amount of self-control. However, in front of a top-notch beauty like Chun Sichuan, who was as perfect as an exquisite porcelain, how many people could resist her? Among men, Ji Dong's self-control was definitely extremely strong. However, don't forget that Chun Sichuan had not only appeared in front of him, but had also started to chase after him. Facing such a beautiful girl who was willing in front of him, if it wasn't for his stubborn love for the flames in his heart, he probably wouldn't have been able to endure it a long time ago. After all, he was still a human, and everyone had 7 emotions and 6 desires. Jumping out of the river and landing on the shore, Ji Dong was speechless when he saw his wet clothes. He was too impatient just now and jumped into the river without even taking off his clothes. He deserved to be in such a sorry state. He took off his wet clothes and changed into a new one. He sorted out his emotions and tried his best to calm himself down. He even used all his thoughts on the 4 years of flaming bar to return to normal. Ji Dong's biggest mistake was to underestimate the seductive power of Chun Sichuan's body. He could barely control himself when facing Chun Sichuan, but when their bodies touched, Ji Dong's self-control almost collapsed instantly. He slowly walked back reluctantly. Ji Dong smiled bitterly in his heart. In order to escape, he had even agreed to something that he should not have agreed to. The following period would be even more difficult. After entering Dongmu Empire, he would have to fulfill his promise with Chun Sichuan. When Ji Dong returned to Chun Sichuan's side, he was surprised to find that she seemed to have recovered her composure. There was a tranquil smile on her delicate and fair face. She was squatting there, fiddling with some dried branches that she had picked up from the surroundings. She took out some dry food and fruits and placed them beside her. She looked at the firewood in front of her and waited quietly. Looking at her tranquil expression, Ji Dong's heart trembled again. He hurriedly suppressed his thoughts and lowered his head, not daring to look at her any longer. He bit the tip of his tongue lightly, using the pain to calm his heart. Why was his self-control so weak now? Ji Dong did not understand. It was not that his self-control had weakened, but it was because Chun Sichuan's position in his heart had become more and more important. She had subtly seeped into his heart like a moisturizer. However, his love for the flaming bar was even stronger, so he would never admit that he had any feelings for Chun Sichuan. Humans were emotional creatures. Time was the foundation of relationships. This saying was not wrong at all. After being together for so long, how could Ji Dong not feel a little moved by Chun Sichuan? Teacher Ji Dong, you're back. Light the fire. Let's heat up the dry food. Chun Sichuan's pleasant voice rang out. She did not go over to him. From her perspective, she did not want to force Ji Dong too much. She did not want to force him to retaliate. If he refused to return to the Eastern Wood Empire with her, wouldn't that be self-defeating? However, this was in line with the essence of relaxation. Her calmness and indifference had a greater impact on Ji Dong's heart. Ji Dong sat down opposite Chun Sichuan. With a flick of his fingers, the firewood in front of him was already set ablaze. This was a rather difficult night for Ji Dong. Fortunately, he could still focus on his cultivation. He did not even say a word to Chun Sichuan for the entire night. In other words, he did not dare to speak to Chun Sichuan for the entire night. This was the first time in half a year that his cultivation was not effective. It was not only because he had left the Dragon Valley, but more importantly, because he had spent most of his energy on calming his heart. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon returned early the next morning. The two of them set off again. Not long after, they finally entered the territory of the Eastern Wood Empire. They headed straight for the capital, Easternwood City. By evening, Easternwood City was already in sight. Only then did Ji-dong let the sacred evolution fire dragon land 20 kilometers away from Easternwood City. They could not just fly in like this. The capital of the Easternwood Empire was definitely not lacking in powerful cultivators. Of course, with Chun Sichuan's status in the Easternwood Empire, it would not be too much trouble even if they flew in. Mao Dai and Wu Yangye reluctantly returned to the core of life. Ji-dong looked into the distance and saw nothing but greenery. The Easternwood Empire was indeed famous for its wood character. In terms of environmental protection, it was definitely the best of the 5 empires. Teacher Ji-dong, Chun Sichuan called out softly. Ji-dong turned his head to look at her and asked, "What is it?" Chun Sichuan smiled and said, "From now on, I can't call you teacher anymore. I'll just call you by your name. Also, this is how we should be." As she spoke, she took the initiative to hold Ji-dong's hand. Her smooth little hand melted into Ji-dong's broad and slender palm. A feeling of fullness and comfort immediately spread through Chun Sichuan's body. Ji-dong's soul, in particular, could not resist Chun Sichuan's soul at all. It was as if his soul had merged with hers. Holding Ji-dong's large hand, Chun Sichuan's pretty face revealed a hint of sweetness. She looked up at Ji-dong's seemingly calm and cold face and laughed softly. "Ji-dong, aren't you tired of wearing such a stern face all the time? Why don't you smile a little? We're about to enter Easternwood City. From now on, you're my lover. We should at least be a little happier." Ji-dong forced a smile. After a day of adjustment, his heart had calmed down a lot. At this moment, they were only holding hands without any further contact, so he could barely calm down his emotions. "Let's go," Chun Sichuan said with a little excitement. At this moment, she was like a happy elf. She held onto Ji-dong's hand and walked towards Easternwood City. She was not anxious at all, nor did she urge her man to speed up. She just walked leisurely for the distance of 20 kilometers. Ji-dong did not object. He also needed to adjust his mentality. Since he had already promised Chun Sichuan, he had to help her settle this matter. He told himself in his heart that from now on, he was temporarily Chun Sichuan's boyfriend, and that would be the case until they left Easternwood City. However, this was only to help Chun Sichuan get through this difficult period so as not to affect the group of Heavenly Stem Saints. Also, it was to get the 7th bottle of wine for the flaming bar. He had no other intentions. Chun Sichuan was enjoying the warmth of the sunset, while Ji-dong kept repeating to himself in his heart, I'm pretending. Time waits for no man." When Ji-dong and the rest arrived at Easternwood City, the sky was completely dark and the city gate was already closed. "We can only climb over the wall," Chun Sichuan said helplessly. However, she was really happy. Ever since she was reincarnated into this identity, she had never been this happy. She held onto Ji-dong's hand and strolled onto the sunset. This feeling was too wonderful. It was as moving as drinking wine. Ji-dong nodded and tightened his grip on her hand. He spread his wings on his back. To him, climbing over the city wall was a piece of cake. In just a few breaths, they were already walking on the streets of Easternwood City. At this time, it was early evening and the nightlife had just begun. As the capital of Easternwood Empire, Easternwood City had no lack of entertainment at night. The streets were even livelier than during the day. Many people who had worked hard for a day were looking for entertainment that could make them happy and relax. "Sichuan, where are we going now? Are we going back to the palace?" Ji-dong asked. Chun Sichuan shook her head and said, "It's already so late. I'll bring you back tomorrow morning. Let's find a hotel to stay in tonight." Ji-dong nodded and said, "That's fine. We'll stay for the night. Where are we going to stay? Lead the way." Chun Sichuan burst into laughter and said, "Anyway, it's fine as long as we don't stay in the stupid rich hotel." Hearing this, Ji-dong could not help but smile. Every time he went to the stupid rich hotel, he would run into trouble. He really could not stay there. What surprised him was that Chun Sichuan did not bring him to a luxurious hotel. Instead, she brought him to a relatively small, single-story hotel to stay. This hotel did not look big from the outside, but after entering, it was a completely different world. The rows of single-story rooms were a bit like the houses they stayed in at the headquarters of the stupid rich Chamber of Commerce. It was just not as luxurious. Vaguely, Ji Dong seemed to smell a faint smell of sulfur. He could not help but frown. Why would there be a smell of sulfur in this hotel? Chun Sichuan took the key to the room and led Ji Dong to the room that belonged to them. As soon as they entered the room, Ji Dong was stunned because there was only one room. He originally thought that Chun Sichuan would ask for a suite with 2 rooms like they did in other places. However, there were no 2 rooms here. There was not even a living room and a bedroom. There was only a room about 30 square meters. On one side of the room was a mattress, and the rest of the room was simply furnished. The only redeeming feature was that it was clean. While Ji Dong was surprised, his eyes fell on a door inside the room. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. It turned out that there was another world behind it. There should be another room. He let go of Chun Sichuan's hand, walked over, and opened the door inside. Chun Sichuan did not stop him because at this time, her pretty face was also flushed, and her heartbeat was constantly speeding up. It was obvious that she had planned to stay in this hotel. It was also one of the steps that she had discussed with Meow Meow. It would also be her first attempt. She did not know whether she could succeed or not. She was just trying her best. Ji Dong pushed the door inside, and his face suddenly became ugly again. Behind the door was not a room, but a small courtyard. The courtyard was not big, only about 20 square meters. In this 20 square meters, there was a pool of about 10 square meters on one side. He did not know what it was used for. Looking up, he could see the night sky. Obviously, it was not a place to sleep. Sichuan, why did you only get 1 room? This is simply nonsense. Ji Dong walked back to the room and said with slight anger. Chun Sichuan said, Ji Dong, we are a couple now. We can't live separately. Otherwise, it will prove to my father that we are already together. It is not difficult for my father and the people over there to find out my whereabouts after I return to Domu City. Therefore, we must live in the same room. Teacher Ji Dong, I am a girl, but I am not afraid. What are you afraid of? Ji Dong was really afraid. Just the thought of living in the same room made his heart beat faster. His eyes flickered, and Ji Dong said resolutely, No, absolutely not. I'm only pretending to be your boyfriend. I'm not real. If you live in the same room with me, how will you marry in the future? I can't ruin your reputation. Chun Sichuan lowered her head and said lightly, Ji Dong, do you think that what I said to you before was a joke? Well, I will solemnly repeat it to you now. Other than you, I will not marry anyone else in this life. What does my reputation have to do with me? Ji Dong listened to Chun Sichuan's words and couldn't help but feel a little stunned. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. Chun Sichuan sighed softly and said, Ji Dong, I will never make things difficult for you. You can live in the room, and I will live in the small courtyard. That should be fine, right? It's not like we have never slept in the open. As she spoke, she had already walked out. Ji Dong hurriedly followed her out and said, Sichuan, it should be me who lives in the courtyard. You can go to the room. Chun Sichuan thought in her heart, if I live in the room, how can I carry out the plan? She looked at Ji Dong and said lightly, Ji Dong, now there are only 2 choices for you. I will live outside, and you will live inside, or I will live with you. I only have this small request. You won't agree to it? I'm not that weak. In the face of Chun Sichuan's sudden, unyielding attitude, Ji Dong couldn't help but be a little stunned. His brain was spinning quickly, and after carefully weighing the pros and cons, he had no choice but to retreat to the room. Letting her live outside was much better than the 2 of them living together. However, letting a girl live in the courtyard, Ji Dong really couldn't bear it. Opening the curtains, Ji Dong wanted to see how Chun Sichuan lived in the courtyard. In his imagination, Chun Sichuan would at most sit cross-legged and cultivate in the courtyard for a night. Chapter 458. Ji Dong initially thought that Chun Sichuan was only cultivating in the courtyard. After pulling open the curtains, he saw that Chun Sichuan was squatting by the 10-square-meter hot spring. She seemed to have opened something, accompanied by the sound of water and hot steam. What's she doing? Ji Dong walked out of the back door again and asked Chun Sichuan curiously, Sichuan, what are you doing over there? Chun Sichuan replied without turning her head, I'm taking a bath. I chose this hotel because of its special feature. The hot spring here is the best in Domu City. It's very comfortable to soak in. As she spoke, she stood up and took off her coat, revealing her undergarments. Fortunately, it was late autumn and they had quite a lot of clothes on. However, when he saw Chun Sichuan take off her clothes, Ji Dong was shocked and asked, "Sichuan, you're going to take a bath in the courtyard?" Chun Sichuan turned to look at him with a strange expression on her face. "I live in the courtyard, and the hot spring is also in the courtyard. Why can't I take a bath? Ji Dong, why don't you join us? You're my lover now. If you want to join us, I won't object." As she spoke, her pretty face blushed slightly, but she had a faint smile on her face. Her hands had already started to take off her undergarments. Ji Dong closed the door as if he was running away and quickly closed all the curtains. In the process of closing the curtains, he even used his flying serpent flash. One could imagine how flustered he was right now. Chun Sichuan looked at the door and giggled. She deliberately said, "Coward." Her voice was not soft, so Ji Dong could definitely hear her. As she spoke, she really took off her clothes. Looking at the steaming hot water in front of her, Chun Sichuan looked up at the sky and secretly prayed in her heart, "God of evil, if you really want me to fulfill my promise to you, then let's have a heavy rain later." As she prayed, Chun Sichuan gritted her teeth and finally took off the last piece of clothing on her body. Her slender legs stepped lightly into the spring water, making a series of splashing sounds. Ji Dong stood in the room with his back facing the window. The curtains on the other side of the window were light-colored. Although he couldn't see the real scene outside after closing the curtains, he could still see some shadows under the moonlight. Ji Dong swallowed hard and tried to tell himself not to think about it. However, at this moment, he could no longer control his thoughts. There was only a window between them. Chun Sichuan was taking a shower outside, and he was standing in the room. In his ears, he even began to recall what Chun Sichuan had said before. "Ji Dong, come with us." Such a simple sentence definitely had a tyrannical impact. Ji Dong only felt the blood in his body boiling, especially the sound of water coming from outside. His brain even began to uncontrollably imagine the actual appearance of Chun Sichuan's alluring body. How could this be? The bitter smile on Ji Dong's face became more and more intense. Wouldn't he have to endure more torture tonight than yesterday? Right now, he only hoped that Chun Sichuan's bath would be a little faster, a little faster. Quickly sitting on the floor, Ji Dong kept chanting in his heart, "Namo Amitabha, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form." As it turned out, a girl's bathing speed would never be too fast. Moreover, Chun Sichuan brought Ji Dong to live here with a purpose. It was specifically to seduce him. Originally, Chun Sichuan had no confidence in this at all. However, this confidence was brought to her by Ji Dong. Yesterday, when she saw Ji Dong flee, she knew that she was not unattractive to Ji Dong. With this premise, she naturally had more confidence today. Soaking in the hot spring, the slightly scorching hot spring seeped into her body, causing Chun Sichuan's originally tense emotions to gradually relax. Soaking a hot spring was really a wonderful enjoyment, especially in this kind of open-air hot spring. Looking at the moon and stars in the sky, it was an even more beautiful enjoyment. It seemed that choosing this place was the right choice. From the perspective of the flaming bar, it was actually her first time here. However, in the memory of this body, she had good memories of this place. Now, it seemed that this was indeed the right choice. Soaking in the slightly scorching hot spring seemed to relax all the bones and muscles in her body. Even her mind was slightly more relaxed. Chun Sichuan was no longer as nervous as before. Although Chun Sichuan did not know that Ji Dong was bitterly chanting Amitabha in the room, when she saw how quickly Ji Dong drew the curtains, she knew that her plan was effective. With great difficulty, Ji Dong used the faith of his past life to slightly calm himself down. However, he heard Chun Sichuan's voice. "Ji Dong, can I trouble you to throw me the big towel in the room? I'm almost done." Ji Dong's upper body swayed, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Don't be like this. You're going to kill me. Don't you know how tempting you are?" Faced with such an absolute vitality, An absolute beauty that could not be hit, scolded, or even avoided. Ji Dong's current feelings could only be described as being in so much pain that he wished he was dead. He had already begun to consider whether he should give up on the bottle of wine and escape from this place as soon as possible. After a few violent breaths, Ji Dong stood up again, walked to the side, grabbed the big towel, and walked to the door. He opened the door a little, and with a shake of his hand, he threw the big towel outside based on his previous memory. "Thank you." Chun Sichuan's melodious voice rang out, followed by the sound of water splashing. Ji Dong immediately thought of a picture of a beauty coming out of a bath. "Ji Dong, you really don't want to come and take a bath? It's so comfortable. This pool is very big, and there's no problem at all for two people. How about I put the towel around me and take a bath? I won't let you see anything you shouldn't see." Poof! Finally, 2 lines of blood spurted uncontrollably from Ji Dong's nose. At this time, Chun Sichuan stood up from the pool and looked in the direction of the door. When she suddenly saw blood spurting out, she was shocked and rushed over almost immediately. "Ji Dong, what's wrong?" Chun Sichuan had already rushed to the front of the door in the midst of her anxious exclamation. "Don't come over!" While Ji Dong was shouting, Chun Sichuan had already rushed in front of him, and it was too late to shout. Chun Sichuan was standing in front of Ji Dong and clearly saw the blood flowing out of Ji Dong's nose like 2 red snakes. She hurriedly used the big towel in her hand to help him wipe it, but she completely ignored the embarrassment of being naked at this time. As the saying goes, concern leads to confusion. At this time, she really didn't want to seduce Ji Dong, but because she saw Ji Dong's nose bleeding, it was the most direct reaction. However, it was this immediate reaction that brought the greatest impact to Ji Dong. When Chun Sichuan handed over the towel, her perfect body was completely presented in front of Ji Dong. It was absolutely the golden ratio, and the ratio of the length of her legs to her body was exactly 0.618. Her waterfall-like dark green hair was scattered behind her, and some of it rested on the snow-white, plump chest. Her white and tender skin was like soft tofu, and the crystal-like water droplets were constantly rolling down. It was simply an insult to describe Princess Xian as a lotus flower out of the water. Chun Sichuan's beauty was simply indescribable. In his previous life, Ji Dong always thought that girls were much more beautiful when they wore clothes than when they were not, because good clothes and decorations could enhance a person's temperament. However, this kind of thinking was not applicable to Chun Sichuan at all. Even when they were together at the Flaming Bar, Ji Dong had never seen the Flaming Bar completely naked. It could be said that Chun Sichuan was the first girl who confessed to him, and this stimulation made Ji Dong's nose continue to bleed uncontrollably. "You!" Ji Dong suddenly closed his eyes, and at the same time, he pushed backwards, trying to push Chun Sichuan out of the door. However, he was in an absolute panic at this time, so he naturally lost his aim when he pushed. He just happened to push the towel that Chun Sichuan handed over, and then pushed some protruding parts of Chun Sichuan's body. It was very elastic, soft, and plump. Fortunately, he did not feel the slipperiness of the water droplets, but even so, Ji Dong almost completely lost control. He had already used God-killing attraction with his left hand, and after pushing Chun Sichuan away, the door was slammed shut. Ji Dong held the door handle tightly, lest Chun Sichuan rushed in again. Even outside the door, Chun Sichuan could clearly hear his heavy breathing. It was only then that Chun Sichuan cried out in shock and quickly covered her body with the towel. Ji Dong, who was in the room, heard the splash of water. It was obvious that Chun Sichuan had jumped into the hot spring pool again. Of course, Ji Dong understood that Chun Sichuan rushed over because of his nosebleed. However, even so, he could not stand it. His heart was beating at least 3 times faster than before, and he could clearly feel the speed of his blood circulation. Ji Dong's face was completely hot, and even his eyes had become a little red. Panting heavily, the effect of Namo Umitba was no longer effective. All he could do was hold on to the door tightly to stabilize his mind. With a slap, Ji Dong slapped himself hard. "Ji Dong, what nonsense are you thinking? You already have the flaming bar. How can you have such a strong desire for another girl? Are you worthy of the flaming bar? Are you worthy of everything the flaming bar has done for you? Ji Dong could not help but recall everything that happened on the Holy Evil Island. When he returned to the core world, the last words left by the flaming bar before he left kept repeating in his mind. In order to calm himself down, he had no choice but to summon the most painful scene in his heart. The heart-wrenching pain was like ice water that woke him up, and the boiling blood in his body finally calmed down. Chen Sichuan's breathing was no weaker than Ji Dong's. It took her a lot of effort to calm herself down. He saw it, he must have seen it. She bit her red lips lightly and sighed in her heart. After gradually calming down, Chen Sichuan thought about how Ji Dong had seen her earlier. He was so agitated that he even had a nosebleed. This was actually not a good thing. She knew Ji Dong too well. She knew that this would definitely make Ji Dong even more wary of her. It seemed that today's plan would not work, especially when the moon and stars were still bright in the sky. It did not look like it was going to rain at all. With a soft sigh, Chen Sichuan began to wash her body. She did not want to agitate Ji Dong any further in case it backfired. Chen Sichuan got up from the pool and wrapped a big towel around her body. She looked around helplessly. It seemed that she really had to meditate in this courtyard for the whole night. Just as she was feeling a little depressed, a sudden clap of thunder sounded without warning. The loud rumble gave her a fright. When she looked up, the clear sky was rapidly gathering dark clouds. It immediately created an oppressive feeling, as if dark clouds were pressing down on her. Could it be that the god of evil had heard her prayers? Chen Sichuan stared at the dark clouds in the sky, dumbfounded. This clap of thunder also caused Ji Dong, who was in the room, to shiver. He woke up from the pain that was wreaking havoc in his heart. At this moment, he did not dare to drink. He was afraid that if he got drunk, he would do something that would let the flaming bar down. What would he do? Why was there thunder? Before Ji Dong could think further, the clap of thunder sounded one after another. The roar of thunder continued to wreak havoc, as if it was going to destroy the whole world. Was it going to rain? Such a dull clap of thunder. Was it going to rain? Ji Dong frowned. If it was really going to rain, how could he let a girl stand outside in the rain while he stayed in the room? After all, he was a man. Just as Ji Dong was having a battle in his heart, suddenly, a series of almost continuous banging sounds were heard. In the celestial realm, "Foul! God of evil, you're breaking the rules," the god of kindness shouted angrily. "How am I breaking the rules? I'm just manipulating the weather," the god of evil said lazily. The god of kindness said angrily, "Isn't manipulating the weather a violation of the rules? You're indirectly helping them get together. Women are naturally attracted to men. Although Ji Dong can't control himself, it's just a matter of lust. You're helping the flaming bar. Aren't you just hoping that something will happen between them?" The god of evil snorted and said, "You said it yourself, it's indirect. A straight body is not afraid of a crooked shadow. If Ji Dong doesn't have any ulterior motives, what's the point of manipulating the weather?" The god of kindness became even angrier and said, "But you can't do this. The flaming bar was just praying for rain, but you made a huge hailstorm. You can't do this." Chapter 459. Bang, 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 bang. Ji Dong was startled by the rapid explosions. He didn't dare to open the back door. Instead, he opened the front door and looked outside. As soon as he opened the door, he was immediately startled. Hailstones the size of ping-pong balls were falling from the sky, hitting everything outside. All kinds of plants in the hotel yard were continuously smashed by the hailstones, and a thick cold air immediately hit him as soon as he opened the door. After closing the door, Ji Dong was stunned. From the thunder to the falling hailstones, he did not hear Chen Sichuan's voice from the backyard. She did not even call out to him, nor did she ask to come in to hide. Why? What was wrong with her? Ji Dong quickly walked to the back door and opened it. He could not care less in such a heavy rain and hailstones. After opening the door, he saw Chen Sichuan. The moment he saw her, Ji Dong felt as if the softest part of his heart had been violently touched. Chen Sichuan was standing under the eaves next to the door. The eaves only extended a foot from the house. In such a heavy storm with hailstones, How could the small eaves shelter her from the wind and rain? She stood there with the towel tightly wrapped around her body. Her delicate body was even trembling slightly as she stared at the misty rain in front of her. With her cultivation, of course, the hailstones could not hurt her. However, looking at the water droplets rolling down her face and the big towel that was completely soaked in the rain, Ji-dong could no longer bear the blame in his heart. He grabbed Chen Sichuan's shoulder and pulled her into the room. When he pulled her, only Ji-dong knew how much he wanted to pull her into his arms instead of into the room. With a bang, he closed the door, isolating himself from the outside wind and rain. Looking at Chen Sichuan, who was dripping with water, Ji-dong almost roared. "It's raining so heavily, why don't you come in?" Chen Sichuan lowered her head slightly and said pitifully, "I'm sorry, I don't want you to be so sad. I'm sorry, Ji-dong, I really didn't mean it. I was afraid that if I came in, your nose would bleed again." "You." Ji-dong was a little sluggish. She was truly beautiful. At this moment, her lovely appearance caused Ji-dong's body and mind to tremble. His heart, which had just calmed down, once again began to boil. He was even more impulsive than before. Biting his lower lip, Ji-dong walked to the side and threw another big dry towel to Chen Sichuan. Then he walked to the corner of the room and sat down with his back facing her. "Quickly wipe the rain off your body. You can sleep in the room too. You can sleep on the bed. I'll just meditate here." Chen Sichuan didn't object. She didn't say anything. She put the wet towel aside and used the dry towel to wipe her body. Then, she crawled into the clean and dry quilt on the bed. She hugged the quilt, but her body was still very cold. Of course, she could see Ji-dong's pain at this moment. He only wants this body of mine, but he doesn't love me, right? Chen Sichuan was very clear in her heart. She understood that if she didn't have such a perfect body, Ji-dong wouldn't be so attracted to her. In fact, she didn't know that if it wasn't because she had a trace of the flaming bar's divine sense in her soul world that subtly influenced Ji-dong, even if she was so perfect, she wouldn't have such a feeling of attraction to Ji-dong. Ji-dong could reject Chen Sichuan, but how could he resist the attraction of the flaming bar's divine sense? Ji-dong's heart was boiling. At this moment, his mind was completely blank. Outside, it was a world of wind and rain. The warmth in the room made him feel even more enchanting. There was no other way. Perhaps anesthesia would make him feel better. Ji-dong almost subconsciously took out a bottle of liquor from the vermilion bird bracelet. He didn't even bother to unscrew the bottle cap. He directly cut off the mouth of the bottle with his palm, tilted his head back, and gulped down the fiery liquor. Sure enough, the burning sensation that instantly spread throughout his body created a strong conflict with the boiling blood in his body. Under the stimulation of the strong alcohol, he finally managed to suppress the pity, desire, and other emotions that he couldn't explain clearly and unexplainable in his heart. It was as if he was grasping at a life-saving straw. After finishing one bottle, he immediately took out a second bottle of wine. Just like when Raging Flame had just passed away, he constantly used the liquor to anesthetize his body, drinking bottle after bottle. Ji-dong was a little glad. He was glad that he always carried so much liquor in the vermilion bird bracelet. At this moment, it finally played a certain role. His alcohol tolerance was very good, but he couldn't help but drink bottle after bottle of different liquor. Gradually, his vision became blurry. The pleasure of anesthesia stabilized his emotions. "Flaming bar. I only have a flaming bar. I only love the flaming bar. Flaming bar, do you know? I miss you so much." Ji-dong murmured in a low voice. His voice was even a little choked. He was already a little drunk. Under these circumstances, the desire from before had already disappeared. Instead, the longing for the flaming bar was like a spring, flooding every corner of his soul. Chen Sichuan sat on the bed and looked at the suffering Ji-dong. Her heart was already trembling. As she watched Ji-dong drink bottle after bottle of liquor, the conflict in her heart rose to the peak. The sudden call made Chen Sichuan sit up abruptly. She looked at Ji-dong, her eyes uncontrollably erupting with strong emotions. The changes in the outside environment and everything that had just happened not only affected Ji-dong, but also her at the same time. It had been more than a year. She had returned to this world and been with Ji Dong for more than a year. The pain she had endured for more than a year was no less than the pain Ji Dong was suffering in his heart. It made her feel like she was about to collapse at any time. Ji Dong drank the liquor with his back facing her. This call also deeply pierced the softest part of Chun Sixuan's heart. Ji Dong. Chun Sixuan called out softly. She did not control her voice. Whether it was her tone or her emotions, they all belonged to the flaming bar. Yes, at this moment, she seemed to have returned to her original identity. As she looked at Ji Dong in front of her, she could no longer suppress the emotions in her heart. When he heard this call, Ji Dong's body suddenly stiffened. This time, his blood was really ignited. He turned around abruptly and looked at the bed. In his blurred eyes, he did not see Chun Sixuan, but his flaming bar. The flaming bar that he had yearned for day and night. Flaming bar, you're the flaming bar. Raging flames, you're raging flames. You're back, you're finally back. Raging flames, do you know how much I've missed you? Do you know that your departure is the darkness of the entire world for me? I miss you so much. Raging flames, I miss you so much. I beg you, let me go to another world with you. I can't endure this kind of torture anymore. Tears flowed uncontrollably down Ji Dong's face. His sobbing voice caused Chun Sixuan's body to tremble violently. At this moment, Ji Dong's eyes were bloodshot. He had fallen into a drunken, hallucinatory state. Chun Sixuan did not drink, but her current mental state was no better than Ji Dong's. In Chun Sixuan's heart, the cold voice of the god of evil began to remind her. However, at this moment, she even forcibly ignored this voice. In her eyes, there was only Ji Dong, only Ji Dong. She suddenly stood up and, disregarding the fact that she was naked, threw herself at Ji Dong. I'm back. Yes, Ji Dong, I'm back. I know how much you've suffered. I missed you so much. I've also lived in so much pain that I wish I were dead. I don't know how many times I've wanted to tell you who I am, but I didn't dare to. However, I don't want to see you in so much pain anymore. Even if my body and soul are destroyed, let's go to hell together. Suddenly, the look in her eyes changed. Her gaze became that of the blazing flaming bar. The flaming bar that was burning with Ji Dong's soul flew into Ji Dong's embrace like a swallow. Ji Dong hugged her tightly and said, Flaming bar, my flaming bar is back. My flaming bar is back. He seemed to be shouting crazily. His voice resonated with the thunder, lightning, and wind outside. He hugged the beautiful woman in his arms tightly, as if he wanted to fuse her body with his. At this moment, their emotions were already in an indescribable, almost hysterical state. Under such circumstances, they had already thrown away all the restraints in their hearts, and all the pain that they had been suppressing in their hearts all this time also gushed out like a volcano eruption at this moment. In Ji Dong's eyes, the person he saw and hugged was not Chun Sixuan, but the flaming bar, his perfect and beloved flaming bar. Chun Sixuan had also forgotten about the threat of the god of evil. At this moment, the two of them hugged each other tightly, all the repressed emotions completely bursting out. Everything in the room darkened. All that was left was the sound of intense panting. Their two bodies were like lightning striking the ground. The explosion after the repression was absolutely terrifying. Ji Dong and Chun Sixuan's minds were completely blank. At this moment, they were completely prepared by their body's instincts. The pain, depression, and all sorts of negative emotions in their hearts exploded at this moment. The contact of their bodies, the perfect fusion of their souls, and the limitless release of their inner world made them finally fuse as one at this moment. Chun Sixuan was originally naked, but Ji Dong's clothes had already disappeared in the next moment. They were directly burned to ashes by the flames of desire on his body. Outside, there was still the sound of thunder. The hail had already passed and was replaced by a violent storm. The shadows of the trees swayed in the strong wind from the window. The two scorching bodies had already rolled onto the bed. This was the release of their bodies and souls. It was as if all the pain had come to an end. It was jerky, even immature, but incomparably passionate. Both of them were releasing everything about each other, completely opening their hearts to each other. Spring couldn't be described as rising in the room. It should be described as blazing, a blazing heat that ignited all their emotions and desires. This pair of lovers had finally truly become one, walking towards the perfect fusion of soul and desire. The dark clouds in the night gradually dispersed. The moment the wind and rain stopped, a trace of white had already appeared on the distant eastern horizon. Faint golden threads appeared at the edge of the sky, spreading rapidly. The sky was bright. It was a brand new day. The plants that were able to escape the wind and rain last night were thriving again. The night passed just like that. It was also at this moment that the two people in the room finally quietened down. They had both been suppressed for far too long. They had been in pain for far too long. In a situation where they had completely lost their minds, their bodies were also doing their best to release everything they had. The sky was bright. After the storm last night, it was another sunny day. However, the sound of even breathing could be heard from the room. Ji Dong and Chun Sichuan's bodies were tightly entwined, and they fell asleep in extreme exhaustion. Last night was crazy. The room seemed to have been baptized by a typhoon. Chun Sichuan fell asleep 2 hours earlier than Ji Dong. This was because during the process, she was like a leaf boat in the sea, constantly bearing the impact of the storm. Ji Dong was absolutely exhausted. His madness last night, if it was anyone else, they would not be able to bear it. Only Chun Sichuan, who had a huge amount of life energy, could barely bear it. He was really too tired, not just physically tired, but also mentally tired. After releasing all of this, he naturally fell into a deep sleep. The dragon egg, Si Dong, left Chun Sichuan's embrace for the first time. It lay quietly in the corner of the room, glowing with a faint golden light. Perhaps it was because of its shyness, but Chun Sichuan covered its body with the towel she used yesterday. One day passed in a deep sleep. His original plan to go to the Dongmu Empire's imperial palace was completely delayed. By the time Chun Sichuan woke up, it was already afternoon. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Ji Dong's face right in front of her. Ji Dong was sleeping soundly, like a big child. As he inhaled and exhaled, he released the scent she was most familiar with. At this moment, there was a satisfied smile at the corner of his mouth. Occasionally, he would murmur, "Flaming bar." Chun Sichuan's body moved, and she immediately frowned. She let out a low moan. She felt as if her whole body was falling apart. Every part of her body was extremely sore, especially her lower body, which felt like it was going to be torn apart. The pain in her body made her hit Ji Dong lightly. Her pretty face was as red as an apple. She said, "This guy, he doesn't know how to be kind to women at all. It's my first time. It really hurts." Chun Sichuan gritted her teeth and endured the pain. She silently urged the Yi-Wood magic in her body to circulate. A thick aura of life gradually spread throughout her body, helping her to recover. After a full 15 minutes of urging, she felt a little better. She forced herself to sit up on the bed. Chapter 460. During this process, her eyes never left Ji Dong. He slept really soundly. If it was in the past, although I didn't make much noise, he should have woken up long ago. Although it was painful last night, it was really comfortable there. Finally, I became his woman. This time, he can't abandon me, right? Just thinking of this, suddenly, Chun Sichuan's face became pale because she suddenly remembered that she seemed to have told Ji Dong her real identity last night. Cold sweat appeared on her temples almost in an instant. What should I do? What should I do? The evil god said that if she told Ji Dong her real identity, he would destroy his body and soul. No, don't. Chun Sichuan almost screamed out loud. A series of violent gasps caused the happiness in her heart to vanish. Now that she had woken up, the fear in her heart intensified. She had finally become Ji Dong's woman. If his body and soul were to perish at this time, what would she do? This panic lasted for a long time, and Chun Sichuan gradually calmed down. The first thing she thought of was that Ji Dong drank a lot last night. When he was with her, he was not sober. Maybe he didn't hear what she said? Or did she tell him that it was an auditory hallucination? At the very least, his body and soul had not been completely destroyed, which proved that the punishment of the evil god had not yet befallen him. After all, His appearance belonged to Qin Shi Xuan. Even if he woke up and interrogated him, he would still deny it and leave. Thinking of this, Qin Shi Xuan calmed down a little. With the powerful healing and recovery ability of immune magic, the wounds on her body gradually healed. She carefully got out of bed, first washed her body, and then washed the towel with water. After cleaning up Ji Dong's body with a red face, her eyes fell on the destroyed room. Qin Shi Xuan shook her head helplessly. He was really too violent last night. This bad guy. Qin Shi Xuan turned her head again to look at Hyoheim. She couldn't help but see the bright red stain on the bed. This was the proof that she had finally become his woman. When he woke up, she had to put away the bedsheet. Thinking of this, Qin Shi Xuan's pretty face couldn't help but turn even redder. She thought to herself, what's done can't be undone. Even if he still refuses to be with me after he wakes up, I just have to force him to say those 3 words to me. At that time, I can truly admit my identity. I will be with him forever. Thinking of this, Qin Shi Xuan couldn't help but feel elated. After cleaning up the room, she changed into a clean underwear. Then she went back to Ji Dong's side and laid down gently against him. Since she had woken up, she was still a little shy to stay naked beside him. Leaning into his broad and warm chest, she pulled his arm over her body and wrapped her arms around his neck. Qin Shi Xuan's heart was full of satisfaction. How good would it be if she could be with him like this every morning when she was awake? She really looked forward to such a day coming soon. The sun began to set again. Ji Dong only felt that his whole body was so comfortable that he wanted to moan. All the accumulated depression in his heart seemed to have disappeared. His head was still a little dizzy. This was the pain brought by the hangover, but this pain was completely negligible compared with the physical comfort. It was so comfortable. His body moved subconsciously. Suddenly, he felt something close to him. It was soft and bouncy, warm and fragrant. Suddenly, his body stiffened and he suddenly opened his eyes. What he saw was Qin Shi Xuan's beautiful face. At this moment, she was sleeping soundly in his embrace. When he lowered his head to look at himself, Ji Dong discovered that he was completely naked. Instantly, he fell into a state of panic. What was going on? What happened? What happened? He tried hard to recall everything that happened last night. He seemed to have drunk too much. Then, it seemed that he came back from the flaming bar. Then he hugged her, got her, and climbed to the peak of bliss again and again. Could it be? Ji Dong suddenly sat up, and Qin Shi Xuan, who was close to him, was also pulled up. With a moan, Qin Shi Xuan suddenly woke up from her deep sleep. Her starry eyes opened slightly. When she saw Ji Dong's dull expression and frozen gaze, she immediately woke up from her daze. Ji Dong. Qin Shi Xuan was still in Ji Dong's arms. She followed his gaze and saw the touching dark red spot on the bed. Her pretty face instantly blushed, and she said, "Silly, what are you looking at?" Ji Dong said in a daze, "Last night, you and I..." Qin Shi Xuan murmured softly, giving him a definite answer. "No." Ji Dong suddenly shouted and quickly jumped off the bed. He landed on the ground and looked at Qin Shi Xuan with eyes full of disbelief. He panted heavily. Alcohol was the medium of sex. He drank too much last night and actually mistook Sichuan for the flaming bar. Just as Qin Shi Xuan had predicted, Ji Dong really couldn't remember what happened last night. He had drunk too much in order to numb himself and didn't use his magic to resist the effects of the alcohol. I actually, with you. No, I betrayed the flaming bar. I betrayed my flaming bar. Qin Shi Xuan was also stunned. Although she expected Ji Dong to have some reaction, she didn't expect his reaction to be so intense. Looking at his face full of grief and pain, she couldn't help but be angry and said, "Am I that inferior to your flaming bar? Is it still a humiliation for you to have my body?" Ji Dong shook his head like a madman and said, No, flaming bar. I didn't do it on purpose. I really didn't do it on purpose. I mistook her for you. I really missed you so much that I had this hallucination. No, how could I do this? How could I have a relationship with another woman?" Suddenly, Ji Dong's eyes turned red. He raised his right hand, and instantly, a blinding red light shot out from his right hand and turned into a 3-foot green sword. It was the Vulcan's sword. At this moment, he still wasn't wearing anything. He lowered his head, and his gaze landed on his nether regions. He looked at the root of trouble and said, "It's you. You betrayed raging flames. I am innocent. Only by getting rid of you will I be innocent." As he spoke, he swung his right arm down almost without hesitation. The Vulcan's sword in his hand slashed at the root of his worries. "What are you doing?" Chen Xishuan pounced forward and hugged Jidong's arm. She stopped the Vulcan's sword at the last moment. She was so scared that her face turned pale. How could this be? He was so excited that he castrated himself, just because he had a relationship with her. "Let me go." Jidong roared and said, "It betrayed the flaming bar. I have to get rid of it. Otherwise, how am I going to find a flaming bar in the future? I want to find my lover with my innocence." As he spoke, Jidong activated the mana in his body and struggled with all his might. Chen Xishuan was still a distance away from him and was about to lose her grip on his arm. "Wait a minute. Listen to me. This is all fake." Chen Xishuan shouted in fright. "It's fake?" Jidong's crazed gaze froze for a moment, and he turned to look at Chen Xishuan. Chen Xishuan took a few deep breaths, and her chest heaved up and down. She looked at Jidong, and the look in her eyes became unprecedentedly complicated. After a while, she said with some difficulty, "Yes, all of this is fake. I set this up. I wanted you to think that something had happened between us so that you would be with me because of this." After hearing her words, Jidong's gaze regained some clarity. He said, "What is going on? Make yourself clear." Chen Xishuan looked at him. At this moment, she really wanted to beat him up. She had given him her most precious thing, yet he refused to admit it. He still wanted. "Last night, you drank a lot of alcohol. Then, you suddenly saw me call out the flaming bar. Then, you threw yourself at me and kept calling out the name of the flaming bar. Then, you fell asleep." Jidong recalled carefully. He seemed to remember seeing the flaming bar and throwing himself at it. He really couldn't remember anything after that. He only felt that he had experienced a very blissful process. Chen Xishuan gritted her teeth and continued. "Later, I thought of this idea. I heard from the people in the palace that a woman's first time would always bleed. So I found some animal blood and smeared it on the bed. Then I helped you take off your clothes and hugged you to sleep. I hoped that you would misunderstand. I thought that by doing this, you wouldn't reject me anymore." Towards the end, she spoke much more fluently. Jidong's expression finally softened a little. He looked at Chen Xishuan and said angrily, "How could you do that? You. Chen Xishuan lowered her head. If looks could kill, Jidong would have been dismembered. Of course, she would not let Jidong see that look in her eyes. She could only say aggrievedly, "I like you too much. Don't be angry, okay? I know I was wrong." Jidong snorted angrily. He turned around, pushed the door open, and rushed out. He needed time to calm down. In that instant, his emotions had fluctuated greatly. Even with his strong soul power, he felt that he could not bear it. Moreover, he had a faint feeling that things were not as simple as Chen Xishuan had said. Rushing out of the room, Jidong walked aimlessly on the street. He tried hard to recall everything that had happened last night. In his memory, there was only the existence of the flaming bar. He could not remember what had happened between him and Chen Xishuan. Chen Xishuan was stunned when Jidong left. After Jidong left, Chen Xishuan was also stunned. She had never thought that the final result would be like this. If he wanted her to blame Jidong, Jidong wanted to castrate himself because of his love for raging flames. However, it was impossible for her to not have any reaction after this happened. She had even given her most precious body to someone else, but instead, she had to tell Jidong that nothing had happened. Everything was just a trap that she had set up. Chen Xishuan was so angry that her teeth were itching. She didn't know who she should hate, but no matter what, she couldn't let Jidong cut off the thing that had caused her so much pain last night, but was also very strange. Sitting in the room, Chen Xishuan sighed in her heart. It seemed that she could only endure it. Now she could only hope that Jidong would not be affected by this incident, and that he would come back with her to solve the problem of the engagement. As she thought about it, Chen Xishuan grabbed the pillow beside her and whipped it hard. Obviously, she thought it was someone. However, she soon ran out of strength. Although she had the extreme wood magic to adjust her body, she had been ravaged by a guy who was as strong as a violent bear for a night. It was not something that could be done by running magic. Just as Qin Sixuan was lying on the bed drowsily, the door opened and Ji Dong walked in from outside. As soon as he came back, Qin Sixuan immediately woke up and sat up from the bed to look at him. What made Qin Sixuan very surprised was that Ji Dong's expression had already returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. His entire person looked normal, and even his eyes had become ordinary and unremarkable. Ji Dong, Qin Sixuan wanted to say something, but she really didn't know what to say to him at this time. Ji Dong smiled indifferently and said, "You rest. I will practice for a while. Tomorrow, I will go back to the palace with you." Hearing what he said, Qin Sixuan suddenly secretly breathed a sigh of relief and did not dare to flirt with him. She agreed, got into the quilt, and lay down obediently. Ji Dong walked to the corner of the room and sat down. From the time he left to the time he returned, it had only taken him half an hour. In this short period of time, he had already thought through many things in his mind. The reason why his expression could return to normal was because he had thought of a way to resist Qin Sixuan's charm. As for what he thought about what had happened before and whether he completely believed Qin Sixuan's explanation, only he himself knew. Sitting cross-legged, Ji Dong closed his eyes and started to circulate his mana in his body. Gold and black lights were faintly discernible. With his current cultivation, it was very easy for him to control his mana and prevent it from leaking. However, the light that was emitted from his body quickly attracted the attention of Qin Sixuan, who was lying on the bed. The person who understood Ji Dong's strength the most was Qin Sixuan. Ever since Ji Dong started cultivating, he had followed her and received her guidance. Every time he made a huge leap forward, it was almost inseparable from her. Seeing the change in the light on Ji Dong's body, Qin Sixuan couldn't help but feel strange. She didn't quite understand what he was doing. The gold and black lights flickered before being replaced by a faint milky white light. Following that, a layer of red light appeared from under Ji Dong's skin and covered his entire body in the blink of an eye. It was his divine fire Saint King armor. Chapter 461. The sacred King Godfire armor had been refined into his body by Ji Dong. Although it couldn't be said to have become a part of his body, he could at least use it as he pleased. Looking at Ji Dong's appearance, Qin Sixuan could clearly feel that Ji Dong wasn't cultivating on his own. Instead, he was pouring his ultimate dual flames into the sacred King Godfire armor, as if he was refining it. What's going on? Why would he suddenly want to refine armor? Although Ji Dong had the ultimate dual flames, without the addition of a special item, even his chaotic flame couldn't make the sacred King Godfire armor, which had already reached the level of a substandard god item, have a qualitative leap. What he was doing was completely futile. However, since Ji Dong was in a state of cultivation, Qin Sixuan obviously couldn't disturb him. Her elegant brows furrowed as she thought about something, but she couldn't figure it out. She guessed that everything Ji Dong was doing right now had something to do with her, or even with what had happened before. However, she couldn't understand how Ji Dong's refining of the sacred King Godfire armor had anything to do with it. The strange feeling in her body caused Qin Sixuan to gradually fall asleep, while Ji Dong continued to cultivate. When she woke up from her sleep, it was already the next morning. Qin Sixuan opened her eyes and saw a person sitting in a corner, still covered in the sacred King Godfire armor. However, there was no longer any magical light flashing on his body. Everything looked very normal, so normal that she couldn't get used to it. After another night of cultivation, the healing abilities of the wood element had been fully displayed. At the very least, Qin Sixuan didn't feel any obvious pain anymore. Of course, the process of turning from a girl to a woman still affected her. That crazy night would forever be imprinted in the depths of her soul, and she would never be able to forget it. "You're awake. Let's go eat something." Ji Dong just happened to open his eyes at this moment. More accurately speaking, he had spent the entire night cultivating and hadn't slept at all. Yes. Qin Sixuan got down from the bed obediently. After a night's rest, her emotions had stabilized. Although she wanted to beat the bad guy in front of her, she actually felt more sweetness in her heart. No matter what, as a girl, she was very satisfied to give her most precious thing to the man she loved the most. Whether Ji Dong admitted it or not, she had truly become his woman. After washing up, Chen Xishuan changed into a clean set of clothes. The God Fire Saint King armor on Ji Dong's body had already merged back into his body. However, Chen Xishuan vaguely discovered that under Ji Dong's clothes, there was a piece of armor left on his limbs. It was just that it was covered by his clothes. If it wasn't someone extremely familiar with him, they wouldn't be able to discover it. Why would he leave a few pieces of armor on his body? Chen Xishuan was confused, but she didn't ask. Ji Dong, do you want to take a shower too? Chen Xishuan probed. In reality, she really wanted to taste the hot spring again, but she didn't dare to rashly tease him again. Ji Dong shook his head and also did a simple wash. What made Chen Xishuan extremely surprised was that he actually took the initiative to hold her hand. With a warm smile, he said, "Let's go eat something, then we can go back to the palace together. From now on, I also have to get into character. We're lovers, right?" "Yes." Chen Xishuan stared at him with wide eyes as she nodded frantically. This couldn't be true, right? Could it be that he had already truly acknowledged her? However, at this moment, she faintly noticed that Ji Dong's eyebrows moved slightly. The hand holding her also seemed to tremble slightly. However, all of this happened very lightly. If she didn't carefully feel for Ji Dong's change, she wouldn't have noticed it. "Ji Dong, what's wrong? Are you all right?" Chen Xishuan asked with concern. Ji Dong shook his head and said, "I'm fine. I will definitely do what I promised you. Let's go." The two of them ate in the hotel. They hadn't had a proper meal for 2 days. This breakfast was quite a lot, especially for Ji Dong. It seemed as if he really didn't care about what happened that night. He ate to his heart's content and ate to his heart's content. His breakfast was enough for 4 or 5 ordinary people before he stopped. Letting out a long breath, Ji Dong smiled at Chen Xishuan and said, "It's really good to eat. It must have been hard on you these 2 days. You didn't eat much." As he spoke, he picked up the remaining half a bowl of milk and poured it into his mouth. Chen Xishuan frowned and looked at him. Although Ji Dong's expression was very natural and normal, she still felt that something was wrong. She lowered her voice and whispered, "Ji Dong, we didn't really cut it, did you?" Ji Dong spat out all the milk in his mouth. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and spat it to the side instead of Chen Xishuan. He coughed continuously. Because the movement was too loud, it immediately attracted the attention of others who were also eating in the restaurant. Chen Xishuan hurriedly ran to Ji Dong's side and helped him pat his back. Ji Dong straightened out his breathing and raised his head to look at her angrily. He said, "Why are there so many dirty thoughts in your little head? Haven't all the misunderstandings been cleared up? Why did you cut it?" Chen Xishuan's pretty face turned red. Fortunately, she was wearing a veil, so it was somewhat covered. She mumbled, "I was afraid that you would really act on impulse." Ji Dong picked up the tissue on the table and wiped his mouth. He glared at her and said, "Let's go." "Oh." The two of them left the hotel. Chen Xishuan moved to Ji Dong's side and tried to touch his hand. The gentle touch instantly made Ji Dong feel a little itchy. Chen Xishuan's cold hand felt great to the touch, especially when she was so careful, which made her look even more lovable. Ji Dong grabbed her hand. This time, he paid more attention. His body trembled again, but it was the other arm that Chen Xishuan did not notice. Last night, although Ji Dong only left the hotel for half an hour, he thought a lot during that time. He knew that he actually liked Chen Xishuan. He liked Chen Xishuan, but it wasn't love. It was because of Chen Xishuan, as well as her and the flaming bar's perfection. If this went on, he was afraid that his heart would really betray the flaming bar one day. While he was thinking about other things, the first thing he had to resolve was to have resistance towards Chen Xishuan. Resistance towards beautiful women was easy to say, but it wasn't so easy to actually do it. Chen Xishuan was known as the most beautiful woman in the world, and this title was not made up. Moreover, she was chasing after him. Ji Dong's resistance towards beautiful women was already extremely strong. His heart belonged to someone else, but even so, he was almost defeated by Chen Sixuan's corrosive attacks. It could be seen how attractive Chen Sixuan was. Therefore, after careful consideration, Ji Dong came up with a solution. When a mythical king armor was activated with mana, sharp spikes would appear to attack the enemy. Ever since Ji Dong had fused it with his divine fusion, he could control when and where these spikes came out. Last night, Ji Dong had made all the spikes turn around. When he came into contact with Chen Sixuan's body, he would also activate his mana and move the spikes on the armor to stab himself. Although Ji Dong's body was tough, the mythical king armor was a demigod magic armor, and the spikes were extremely sharp. Under his control, of course it wouldn't really hurt him, but the intense pain in that instant was enough to wake up his tempted heart. He had already tried twice just now, and the truth proved that the effect was quite good. This also made Ji Dong secretly heave a sigh of relief. Right now, he only wanted to quickly complete the agreement with Chen Sixuan. After he returned, he would wholeheartedly devote himself to cultivation and take revenge for the raging flames. Of course, Chen Sixuan didn't know that Ji Dong's calmness was actually a method of self-harm to resist her charm. Seeing that Ji Dong seemed to have returned to normal and seemed to be closer to her than usual, her heart gradually relaxed. She held Ji Dong's big hand tightly, and a satisfied smile appeared on her pretty face. This was Ji Dong's first time in Easternwood City, so naturally, Chen Sixuan led the way. Easternwood City was also the capital, but it had its own unique characteristics. After seeing everything in the city, Ji Dong realized that it was actually the most beautiful city he had ever been to. This was a green city, and at the same time, it was also a sea of flowers. Simply put, no matter where you stood in this city, no matter which direction you looked, there would be at least 10 different types of plants in your eyes. Easternwood City was not like the capitals of other countries, where the buildings were tall, luxurious, and looked imposing. It had a more like a paradise for plants. Few of the houses were more than 2 stories tall, and even the streets that were more than 10 meters wide were completely lined with trees. The dense trees on both sides of the road blocked the sunlight from the sky. Although the weather was getting colder, the feeling of prosperity was still very pleasing to the heart. Is our Easternwood Empire beautiful? Chen Sixuan asked with a smile. Ji Dong nodded and said, "It's very beautiful. This is the most beautiful city I've ever seen." Chen Sixuan giggled and said, "Our Easternwood Empire is rich in all kinds of fruits and flowers. Exporting these things to other countries is also a very big source of income for us. When we return to the palace later, I'll treat you to delicious fruits." Okay, Ji Dong nodded and agreed. Easternwood City was not big. Not only was it not as big as Zhongyuan City, it was even smaller than Jin City. Soon, under Chen Sixuan's lead, the two of them arrived in front of the Easternwood Empire's palace. The palace was heavily guarded. There were at least 100 soldiers standing at the palace gate. There were also soldiers patrolling the wide and tall palace walls. Ordinary people were not allowed to go within 100 meters of the palace. Chen Sixuan confidently pulled Ji Dong's hand as they walked towards the palace gates. Before they could even get close, 20 soldiers had already moved, quickly getting into formation. 20 long spears were already pointed at them. The leader of the soldiers loudly shouted, "Halt! The palace is an important place. No one is allowed to approach. Anyone who violates will be killed without mercy." "Yes, I'm back." As Chen Sixuan spoke, she had already pulled down the veil on her pretty face. If it was any other member of the royal family who returned to the palace so lightly, it was hard to guarantee that the soldiers guarding the gate would not recognize her. They would probably have to carefully examine her and produce some proof of identity before she could enter the palace. However, Chen Sixuan was not an ordinary member of the royal family. Her perfect and stunning face was the best proof of identity. Her stunning beauty stunned all the soldiers at the same time. It was as if they had turned into statues. Chen Sixuan did not blame these soldiers. She turned to look at Hyoheim and winked at him with a bit of pride. It was as if she was saying, "Look, this lady's charm is not small." Ji Dong thought to himself, "If your charm was small, would I be able to refine the God Fire Holy Monarch armor?" I'm going to have to stab myself again. After a moment of shock, the leader of the soldiers finally reacted. With a plop, he knelt on the ground and said, "Welcome back, Princess Xian." Following his shout, the other soldiers also reacted. They all knelt down, but no one dared to look at Qin Shi. Among them, there were not many who had seen Qin Shi before. After all, Qin Shi was usually deep in the palace. However, those who had seen her would naturally have a deep impression of the world's most beautiful woman. Who dared to look at her for too long? If they lost their composure, it would be a great crime. Qin Shi smiled and said, "Get up, everyone. Quickly send someone to inform my father that I have returned. I will return to my quarters first." As she spoke, she pulled Ji Dong's hand and was about to walk into the palace. The leader of the soldiers had already stood up. He did not dare to look at Qin Shi, but he raised his hand to block their way. He asked respectfully, "Your Highness, this gentleman is?" The leader of the soldiers was extremely shocked. One should know that Qin Shi was holding Ji Dong's hand. Although Princess Xian was a bit unruly in the entire Dongmu Empire, her existence was a symbol or even a super idol. The saintess of Dongmu, the most beautiful woman in the world. It could be said that Qin Shi was the pride of the Dongmu Empire. Their saintess was dragging a man back to the palace, and it was obvious that this man was not one of the 16 princes of the Dongmu Empire. What was going on? It was easy to tell that Ji Dong was not a member of the imperial family. His white hair was too special. There was no such person in the Dongmu Empire. Qin Shi snorted and said, "This is my man. What? Are you going to stop me?" Ah! The leader of the soldiers and the surrounding soldiers were stunned by Qin Shi's words. By the time they reacted, Qin Shi had already pulled Ji Dong into the palace. Chapter 462. Qin Shi's words, "This is my man," instantly shocked everyone present. This news was simply too shocking. For a moment, all the soldiers stood there in a daze. "Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and report to your superiors." "No, I'll go myself." The soldier checked the accounts and left in a hurry. In terms of the vastness of the imperial palace, the Central Plains city was the best among the 5 countries on the continent. But in terms of vitality, it was the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire. It was said that there were at least 3,000 kinds of plants in the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire. Almost all the pavilions were hidden in these plants, like a paradise. Perhaps the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire was not as majestic, but it was definitely the most comfortable among the 5 empires of the Radiant Continent. Ji Dong was pulled into the imperial palace by Qin Shi. His first impression was that this was simply a garden. At first glance, he could only see all kinds of plants, herbaceous, woody, and large areas of flowers competing with each other in beauty. Ji Dong could not name more than 80% of them. The fresh air was enough to intoxicate people. "Sichuan, your father will definitely not be afraid of assassination," Ji Dong suddenly said. Qin Shi tilted her head and looked at him. "What?" Ji Dong smiled bitterly. "This imperial palace is simply like a maze. With so many plants, it is impossible to see where the palace is. How can we assassinate him?" Qin Shi smiled. "You are right. When the imperial palace of the Eastern Wood Empire was built, there was an expert guiding it. This place itself is a large wood attribute array called the 99 Chain Maze Array. When someone comes in, they will naturally get dizzy and will naturally be easily caught. Don't think that this place is just for show. In terms of the degree of protection of the imperial palace, even the imperial palace of the Central Plains city can't compare." Ji Dong said, "No wonder I feel that the magic fluctuations in the imperial palace are clearly much stronger than outside. It seems that this array also has the effect of enhancing the wood attribute elements. No wonder you have such a high cultivation level at such a young age. With such a good place to cultivate, although it is not as good as the Dragon Valley, there is not much difference." Qin Shi smiled. "Are you still talking about me? You're not that old. So how did you cultivate?" Ji Dong laughed and said, "I'm different from you. I started cultivating much later than you, but I have a good teacher." Qin Shi was stunned for a moment before she said, "Good teacher? Do you mean Principal Zhu Rong?" Ji Dong shook his head and said, Teacher Zhu Rong also cares a lot about me. But if I were to ask who helped me the most in my training, it's not him, but the flaming bar. Chen Xishuan's heart trembled. Looking at Ji Dong's eyes that were filled with nostalgia, she couldn't help but feel a little dazed for a moment. Ji Dong sighed softly and said, I only started cultivating after I was 10 years old. Everything that I have today can be said to be given to me by the flaming bar. If it wasn't for her company and guidance, I wouldn't be who I am today. She is my lover and also my teacher. It can be said that she gave me a new life. I have never thought that the flaming bar is mine, because I am hers. Do you understand, Xishuan? What made Ji Dong dumbfounded was that after hearing his words, Chen Xishuan's eyes began to gradually turn red. She said softly, The flaming bar is so good to you. What's more, you are so sentimental. Don't worry, I will take good care of you on behalf of the flaming bar in the future. As she said that, she pulled Ji Dong's hand to her face and gently rubbed it. Ji Dong's body trembled again. He had no choice but to use the thorns to free himself from this charming moment with the help of the pain. Chen Xishuan's gentleness would probably melt even a piece of iron. Little did he know that the person in front of him was his flaming bar. After what happened in the past 2 days, Ji Dong had thought through many things. He could not reject Chen Xishuan as strongly as he did in the past. Chen Xishuan had done so much for him, treated him so well, and even saved his life. He owed Chen Xishuan. Moreover, he realized that no matter how forceful he was, it would be useless against Chen Xishuan. Chen Xishuan's immunity was far beyond Ji Dong's imagination. He always thought that if it was another girl, she would probably not care about him anymore. Therefore, Ji Dong was prepared to use the method Chen Xishuan used to deal with him. He would move her with affection, moisturize her silently, and make her retreat. However, the tragic thing was that the effect was obviously not good when he used it for the first time. Not only did Chen Xishuan not feel sad because of it, she looked sympathetic and pitiful. He did not know that the more he expressed his deep feelings for the flaming bar in front of Chen Xishuan, the more it was equivalent to confessing to Chen Xishuan. Of course, she would only feel touched. Just as Ji Dong was feeling defeated and did not know how to deal with it, suddenly, his spirit stirred slightly and he looked in a direction. When Ji Dong noticed it, Chen Xishuan naturally noticed it too. The fusion between their souls seemed to have risen to another level. After Ji Dong looked in that direction, he turned his gaze back to Chen Xishuan with a face full of shock. This was because he was shocked to find that Chen Xishuan's soul and his had fused together casually. This time, he did not accept it of his own accord, but was passively accepting it. In other words, when Chen Xishuan's soul fused with his soul did not resist at all. It just fused naturally. What's going on? How could she be the dominant soul to fuse with my soul? Ji Dong did not even care about the voice on the other side, as he was extremely shocked. Ji Dong was not sure, but Chen Xishuan was very clear about it. She could not help but smile proudly. The reason why her soul could fuse with Ji Dong's soul so smoothly was actually very simple. It could be explained with one word: tacit understanding. The two of them already had a very high degree of tacit understanding. Every time their souls fused, it would make them more compatible with each other. The fusion of souls was not like the fusion of mana. It was much more difficult. Even a revered powerhouse might not be able to do it. This was because everyone had their own selfish motives. During the process of soul fusion, if there was even the slightest bit of selfishness, the fusion would not be successful. When Ji Dong and Chen Xishuan's souls first fused, Ji Dong's heart was like dead ashes because of the flaming bar. Naturally, he did not think too much about it. Needless to say, Chen Xishuan's love for him was even more selfless. That was why there was the first and most difficult fusion. And every time they fused, it was like they were cultivating and they would improve. This was also the feeling that Ji Dong had felt when he was gradually becoming more and more inseparable from the deep thought spiral. The night before yesterday could be said to be an explosion of their soul fusion. In terms of soul fusion, not to mention Ji Dong, even a flaming bar that had lived for countless years was not completely clear about it. The fusion of their souls caused Ji Dong's resistance to Chun Sichuan to gradually weaken, even though he was deeply in love with the flaming bar. Finally, it exploded under that special situation. Without the existence of soul fusion, with Ji Dong's self-control, he might not have been so affected even when facing Chun Sichuan's stunning beauty. Now, their casual fusion was the effect of the fusion of soul and flesh. It was also a process of qualitative change after their souls fused. If the Earth Dragon ancestor was here, he would be shocked to find that their soul fusion had reached a level that was very close to his own. Ji Dong's soul could no longer resist Chun Sichuan's soul fusion. Even if it was a one-sided fusion, it was the same for Chun Sichuan. Similarly, Chun Sichuan could not resist his soul fusion. This was because their souls had completely recognized each other. They completely understood that they would not hurt each other under any circumstances. Seeing the smile on Chun Sichuan's face, Ji Dong had no choice but to stab himself with the Holy King Divine Fire Armor again. He only shifted his gaze away under the stimulation of the pain. Sichuan, you're back. Why didn't you inform me in advance? I would have gone to pick you up. As the voice rang out, a tall figure strode through the forest towards Chun Sichuan and Ji Dong. Seeing this person, Ji Dong could not help but be surprised. With his level of cultivation, he naturally had a unique way of looking at people. The person who appeared in front of him was a middle-aged man who looked to be around 40 years old. He was tall, not all inferior to Ji Dong. His body looked very sturdy, and he walked with a majestic gait. He had a dignified bearing and wore a purple gold crown with 8 gems on his head. He wore a bright yellow official robe, and he looked very spirited. Ji Dong simply glanced at him and found that this middle-aged man had at least 7 crowns of magic power. If he was really around 40 years old, reaching 7 crowns would already be a very impressive achievement. After all, abnormal existences like the Heavenly Stem Saints were extremely rare. As expected of the Eastern Wood Empire's palace, it was indeed a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Ji Dong saw this middle-aged man, and the other was also sizing him up. Seeing Ji Dong standing next to Chun Sichuan and holding her hand in public, the middle-aged man's pupils visibly contracted. But that was all. There was no obvious change in his expression. Big brother. Chun Sichuan giggled. The middle-aged man laughed, opened his arms, and said, "Quick, give Big Brother a hug. I haven't seen you for so long. Big brothers all miss you." "No way." Chun Sichuan turned around and hid behind Ji Dong. If it was the old Chun Sichuan, she would naturally not object to this hug, but now she was in the flaming bar. Other than Ji Dong, she would not let anyone else touch her, even if it was a relative of this body. With Chun Sichuan hiding, Ji Dong naturally came face to face with the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man withdrew his arms and faced Ji Dong alone. His eyes clearly sharpened, and he said, "I've yet to ask, who is this little brother?" Ji Dong smiled indifferently. "I am Ji Dong." "Hello, Your Highness." From the clothes on his body and Chun Sichuan's address, he could naturally distinguish that the middle-aged man standing in front of him was the current crown prince of the Eastern Wood Empire. The middle-aged man stood still, his expression still unchanged, and said, "Hello, my name is Chun Sheng." As he spoke, he took the initiative to extend his right hand to Hyoheim. Although Ji Dong clearly felt that the other party was testing him, the crown prince saw him holding his sister's hand, and it was the first time they met, but he could still be so calm, which had left a good impression on Ji Dong. He also raised his right hand and shook Chun Sheng's hand casually and steadily. The two held hands, and Ji Dong suddenly felt a mellow first-wood magic rushing into his body. Sure enough, as he judged, the big brother of Chun Sichuan in front of him had a cultivation base of more than 77 crowns. The expression on Ji Dong's face remained unchanged, and he even gently shook the other party's hand, as if they were really shaking hands. But Chun Sheng's face was finally not so calm, and shock appeared on his face one after another. In the Eastern Wood Empire royal family, the first genius was undoubtedly Chun Sichuan, the Eastern Wood saint behind Ji Dong. At the age of 20, she had already broken through the 7 crowns and became a heavenly stem Imu saint. Even among the heavenly stem saints, she was second to none in terms of age. And second only to Chun Sixuan was the crown prince in front of him. Chun Sheng was the eldest son of Emperor Chan Xiaofeng of the Eastern Wood Empire. When he was born, he was appointed as the crown prince. For so many years, his position as the crown prince had never been shaken, and there had never been any brothers who had the intention of fighting for the throne. Among the dozen brothers, the relationship was unusually harmonious. It had to be said that the crown prince's ability and strength were amazing, but in terms of talent and cultivation base, he was only lower than Qin Sixuan. Of course, in his own opinion, his cultivation base was higher than Qin Sixuan's. After all, Qin Sixuan left the imperial palace for 2 years. They did not know the degree of improvement in her cultivation base, and no one would think that Qin Sixuan's cultivation base could reach more than 70 level or even had an impact on the 8 crowns. The main purpose of Chun Sheng and Jidong's handshake was naturally to test each other. When he saw Jidong, although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was very calm. He knew that his little sister was not only a mischievous little witch, but also had a very high opinion of herself. She had the qualifications to be arrogant, but when he saw her with Jidong, she was clearly like a gentle kitten. He did not understand what ability this white-haired youth in front of him had to subdue his little sister. He was also very curious about Jidong's white hair. He even wondered if this person in front of him was really as young as he looked. When Chun Sheng's magic power entered Jidong's body, this thought became even more real. He was shocked to find that after his magic power entered Jidong's body, it disappeared like a clay ox entering the sea. The other party simply held his hand, as if nothing had happened, but the magic power he had poured out had disappeared. Chapter 463. Chun Sheng didn't believe it and increased the strength of his magic output, but there was still no response. Jidong's body was like a bottomless abyss, swallowing all of his magic output. Beads of sweat had already started to appear on Chun Sheng's forehead, because he discovered that he couldn't let go even if he wanted to. Although Jidong didn't launch any attacks, none of his attacks had any effect. So what would happen if this continued? All right, you two are men. Why do you need so much time to shake hands? Qin Sixuan flashed out from behind Jidong and pulled Jidong's forearm. Jidong loosened his hand and let go of Chun Sheng. Chun Sheng also let out a big sigh of relief and forced himself to not lose his composure. But his body couldn't help but sway a few times before returning to normal. Dare I ask what magic attribute Senior has? Chun Sheng's expression was already a lot more respectful. The status of a demon master was extremely high in the 5 Elements continent. Even the royal families of various countries wouldn't be willing to offend a demon master with a profound cultivation. Senior? Big brother, are you mistaken? He is my man. How can you call him senior? He is only 22 years old. Qin Sixuan said in a bad mood. 22 years old? Chun Sheng looked at Jidong with a dumbfounded expression. His face was full of disbelief. A 22-year-old could block his magic that was as high as level 73 and still act as if nothing had happened. This was clearly a cultivation that was close to the sovereign level. And if a sovereign level expert wanted to disguise their age, it wasn't impossible. Little sister couldn't have been deceived, right? We thought that Qin Sixuan might have been deceived by Jidong. Chun Sheng's expression became somewhat ugly. His face revealed a clear hostility. Although he felt that Jidong's cultivation was unfathomable, this was still the Eastern Wood Empire's imperial palace. The change in Chun Sheng's mood was naturally noticed by Qin Sixuan. She smiled slightly and pulled up Jidong's right hand and handed it to Chun Sheng. Big brother, you can use your magic to feel Jidong's bones, and you will naturally know his true age. Do you think your smart sister will be deceived in this regard? Wood demon masters were best at medical treatment. Whether it was the first wood or the second wood, they had their own way of observing bone age. Chun Sheng heard his little sister say so and was slightly relieved, but he still held Jidong's wrist and probed it with magic. Jidong stood there, as steady as Mount Tai. Since he promised to cooperate with Chun Sixuan, he naturally had to act well. Chun Sheng's expression became interesting as he probed with his mana. The hostility on his face gradually disappeared and was replaced by an incredulous look of shock. Are you really only 22 years old? His bone age detection was not very accurate with his magic power, but it was not a problem for him to get a rough idea. No matter how he looked, Ji Dong was definitely not over 30 years old. No wonder, even though he was not very handsome, he was able to gain the favor of his little sister. This guy was simply a genius among geniuses. It was just that he did not know what level his cultivation had reached. Chun Sheng winked at Chun Sichuan. Chun Sichuan understood, and the brother and sister walked to the side. What made Ji Dong a little funny was that Chun Sichuan did not cancel the soul fusion between them. Although they walked to the side, everything they said could clearly appear in Ji Dong's mind. Little sister, what's the matter with you? Didn't you like Brother Lin very much before? How come you only brought one back after 2 years? And you even shouted that he was your man at the gate of the Imperial Palace. Don't you know that this will put father in a difficult position? Chun Sheng asked impatiently as he pulled Chun Sichuan to the side. Chun Sichuan giggled and said, "Big brother, don't bother about my matters. This time, I came back to deal with this matter. I won't put father in a difficult position." Chun Sheng said in a low voice, "Little sister, you must give me a reason. You and Brother Lin grew up together. I know the relationship between the two of you very well. Although you're usually a little unruly, you're still very serious when it comes to relationships. How could you change just like that? Who is this person you brought back? You are still young. Don't be deceived." The smile on Chun Sichuan's face faded a little. She snorted and said, "I know what I am doing. I love Ji Dong from the bottom of my heart. How could he lie to me? He can't wait to have me. You don't know how hard it was for me to chase after him." "What? Or did you chase after him?" Chun Sheng stared at his little sister in shock. In his heart, his little sister had always been the pride of the Eastern Wood Empire, the holy maiden of the Eastern Wood Empire. She actually chased after a man who wasn't very handsome. This was something that Chun Sheng couldn't believe. Chun Sichuan sighed and said, "Big brother, do you believe in love at first sight? Ji Dong and I are like that. Don't worry, I'm very clear about what kind of person he is. Only by being with him can I obtain true happiness. Not to mention that we are already together. Even if he doesn't want me, I will still stick to his side. Even if I can only see him every day, I will be very satisfied." Chun Sichuan's words were completely from the bottom of her heart. Ji Dong's soul was fused with hers, so naturally he could deeply feel it. His God-Fire Saint King armor was fiercely stabbing itself again. Chun Sheng was so shocked by Chun Sichuan's words that he couldn't speak. He only felt that after not seeing her for 2 years, his little sister seemed to have changed a lot, or perhaps her heart had changed. Without waiting for Chun Sheng to speak again, Chun Sichuan already asked, "Big brother, have you seen Big Brother Lin recently?" Chun Sheng's expression became serious as he said, "Little sister, Big brother will tell you the truth. In 2 months, it will be your wedding with Brother Lin. Recently, father has used all kinds of connections in the empire to find you. The Lin family is also very serious about this wedding and has given enough face. The 2 ancestors of the Lin family, as well as Brother Lin's parents and Brother Lin himself, have all come and are living in the Imperial Palace. Right now, father has blocked all news of you from them, only saying that you have gone out to study and will be back soon. Now that you've done this, how will father explain this to the Lin family?" Chun Sichuan pouted and said, "Big brother, could it be that you want my marriage to be a political product?" Chun Sheng smiled bitterly. "With father's love for you, there shouldn't be a political marriage for you. But you were the one who promised Brother Lin. Now that you've gone back on your word, what do you want father to do? What do you want the Lin family to do? You have to understand the importance of the Lin family to our Dongmu Empire." Listening to the conversation between brother and sister, Ji Dong finally understood how big the implications of Chun Sichuan's annulment of the marriage were. Without a doubt, the 2 ancestors that Chun Sheng spoke of were naturally the 2 Supreme Being experts that Chun Sichuan had mentioned. A family with 2 Supreme Being experts. One could imagine the power and influence of a family. Chun Sichuan impatiently continued to talk with Chun Sheng and said, "In any case, I don't care. I'm not going to marry." As she spoke, her figure flashed, and she appeared beside Ji Dong, pulling Ji Dong and walking toward the forest. "Sichuan," Chun Sheng called out from behind, but Chun Sichuan didn't have the slightest reaction. She pulled Ji Dong and walked away without looking back. Chun Sheng sighed deeply and shook his head helplessly. This matter had to be discussed with father as soon as possible. He was very clear about his little sister's stubbornness. Now, he didn't know why she suddenly had a change of heart and wanted to be together with that white-haired youth, Ji Dong. He was afraid that this would cause a lot of trouble. Would the Lin family let this matter go? He was afraid that the Lin family had already known about his little sister's return and her shouting in the palace. Chun Sichuan's palace was not in the center of the palace, but in the east. What surprised Ji Dong was that her palace was actually located on an island in the middle of the lake in the palace. The green lake water was so clear that one could see the bottom. There was only a long corridor leading to Chun Sichuan's palace. "Welcome back to the palace, Your Highness." Before they got close, a large number of maids had already greeted them and knelt on the ground. The maids of the princess were usually maids, and there were rarely any eunuchs. "Get up, all of you. Without my orders, no one is to enter my palace. Wait outside. Oh, right, prepare a banquet. I'm a little hungry." Chun Sichuan gave a series of orders as she pulled Ji Dong into the palace as if there was no one else around. Under her orders, no one dared to enter and disturb them. However, when they entered the palace, the group of maids looked at each other in shock. Her Highness had actually brought a stranger into the palace. Even young Master Lin didn't receive such treatment in the past. It should be known that the princess was still unmarried. So how could she bring a man into her palace? This was a huge taboo. Once this got out, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. Moreover, their princess was the saintess of Tuki, the idol of the empire. "Ji Dong, I made things difficult for you." As soon as she entered the door, Chun Sichuan looked at Ji Dong pitifully. She intertwined her hands together and lowered her head like a little girl who had done something wrong. Ji Dong immediately turned his head away and thought to himself, Sichuan, don't you know how tempting you are? Why are you still putting on such an expression?" As he thought about it, he fiercely stabbed himself a few more times. "Sichuan, what are you going to do next?" Ji Dong asked. Chun Sichuan shook her head and blinked. "I don't know either." Ji Dong looked at her in surprise and said, "You don't know either? You haven't thought about how to deal with this matter?" Chun Sichuan shook her head again and said, "It's up to you." Looking at her expectant face, Ji Dong was speechless again. It seemed that this matter was really troublesome. While he was thinking, a voice came from outside. "Sister Sichuan, you're back?" Hearing this voice, Ji Dong couldn't help but be a little surprised. When this voice came out, it was clearly nearly a kilometer away, but when the last word was said, the person had already stopped at the entrance of the corridor in the middle of the lake. So fast, Chun Sichuan saw that Hyoheim was moving. Ji Dong said indifferently, "What will come will come. Let's go. Let's go out together." From a moment he stepped into the imperial palace of Dongmu Empire, he knew that trouble would inevitably follow. Chun Sichuan held onto Ji Dong's arm and even leaned half of her body on Ji Dong. Only then did she walk out with Ji Dong. Ji Dong didn't object to her doing this. Since she had decided to come back to break off the engagement, she might as well be more direct and avoid the trouble of dragging things out. In the imperial palace of Dongmu Empire, Ji Dong was probably the only one who dared to have such an idea. Pride must be built on the foundation of strength. This was a lofty and unyielding character. Otherwise, one would be an idiot. The door opened, and Chun Sichuan walked out of the bedroom with Ji Dong. As soon as the two of them walked out, Ji Dong suddenly felt as if there were two cold lightning streaking across the sky and attacking him. Obviously, it was not a sneak attack weapon, but a pair of eyes. Since the eyes were so focused, it could be seen that this person's cultivation was extraordinary. Standing at the other end of the corridor in the middle of the lake, a man in a white robe was the source of the two cold lightning streaks. This person looked to be about 26 or 27 years old. He was about the same height as Ji Dong, but his shoulders were not as broad as Ji Dong's. He was tall and slender, giving people a feeling that he was tall and straight, like those green bamboos in the forest that never bent and grew straight. Although this person was young, he gave people a refined and profound temperament. Even Ji Dong couldn't help but praise him in his heart after seeing him. He was indeed a talented person with extraordinary cultivation. Ji Dong could vaguely feel that this 26 or 27 years old young man's cultivation was even higher than Chun Sichuan's elder brother, Chun Sheng. Such a person could definitely be called a genius. Unfortunately, his expression was extremely ugly right now. When he saw Chun Sichuan walking out with Ji Dong in her arms, his gaze instantly solidified, as if his pupils were constricting. A strong hostility was released without any concealment. Even when his gaze landed on Chun Sichuan, it did not show any signs of softness. "Sichuan, I need you to give me an explanation. What's going on?" The green-haired man in white said coldly. Chun Sichuan didn't loosen her grip on Ji Dong's hand. Instead, she tightened her grip and said, "Brother Qinyu, I'm sorry. I can't be your wife anymore. I came back this time to break off the engagement." Hearing this, the man called Qinyu by Chun Sichuan suddenly clenched his fists, and a trace of anger appeared on his face. Although they were separated by dozens of meters in the middle of the lake, Ji Dong and Chun Sichuan could clearly feel the strong magic waves released by his body. Chun Sichuan sighed softly and said, "Let me introduce you. Ji Dong, this is Brother Qinyu, my good friend when I was young. He has always been taking care of me." "Brother Qinyu," this is before she could finish her words, Lin Qinyu interrupted her. "Enough, I don't need to know who he is. I'm not interested in this kind of cat or dog. Sichuan, tell me honestly what happened. I don't believe that our relationship would end like this. Are you being threatened by someone? Or do you have any difficulties? Tell Brother Qinyu that I'll take care of everything for you." Chapter 464. Chun Sichuan shook her head gently and said, "There's no need for that, Brother Qinyu. I'm willing to do this. After I met Ji Dong, I realized that we were just siblings. I can't go against my heart. I fell in love with Ji Dong at first sight, and this will never change. I know this will hurt you, but I don't want to lie to you. The person I love is Ji Dong. Brother Qinyu, you're a good man, but I really can't be with you." Lin Qinyu's expression gradually changed. His elegant temperament suddenly became cold. His entire body was emitting a layer of strong green light, which was the effect of the elemental body. He had yet to release his yin-yang crown, but he was able to display the power of the elemental body under such circumstances. It was obvious how powerful he was. With one step, Lin Qinyu had already walked into the corridor in the center of the lake. The entire corridor trembled slightly because of his step, giving off a deep, muffled sound. It was as if he was grabbing people's hearts. The faces of the servants nearby turned pale. Of course, they knew who Lin Qinyu was, so they didn't dare to stop him. However, it was their princess on the other side. Chun Sichuan shook her head helplessly. Actually, she didn't want to hurt Lin Qinyu. She even felt a little guilty towards him. If the previous Chun Sichuan had not drowned, they would have gotten married. Unfortunately, the current Chun Sichuan was already in the flaming bar. How could she marry anyone other than Ji Dong? Chun Sichuan let go of Ji Dong's hand and took a step forward. She was about to stand in front of Ji Dong. Judging from Lin Qinyu's current appearance, it was obvious that this matter couldn't be resolved peacefully. At this moment, a big hand appeared on Chun Sichuan's shoulder. Ji Dong's voice rang in her ears. "Sichuan, let me handle this. This is a matter between men." As soon as he finished speaking, Chun Sichuan's body was transferred to his back. Lin Qinyu walked toward them step by step. With every step he took, his aura would increase a little bit. However, what made Ji Dong nod secretly was that with the increase of his aura, the anger in Lin Qinyu's eyes gradually decreased. Facing his rival in love who had stolen his wife, Lin Qinyu was able to calm himself down when he was about to enter a real battle. This was not something an ordinary genius could do. Ji Dong was still standing there, letting Lin Qinyu's aura grow stronger and stronger. The distance between the two of them was getting shorter and shorter. If Lin Xinyu's aura was like a stormy sea, then Jidong was like a towering mountain that could stop the huge waves. No matter how strong the wind and waves were, they would disappear into the five elements when they got close to him and would not affect Qin Sixuan, who was behind him at all. Why did you steal my Sixuan? Lin Xinyu's eyes were fixed on Jidong's eyes. His spiritual aura and the aura he released were perfectly combined, and he kept attacking Hyoheim. Jidong said lightly, "Two people love each other. Love can't be forced." At this moment, Lin Xinyu was 5 meters away from Jidong, and he stopped. This distance was the best distance for a devil master to attack. Lin Xinyu said, "Sixuan and I grew up together. We are childhood sweethearts, and we are truly in love with each other. You have an ordinary appearance. Do you think you can steal Sixuan's love for me with your strange white hair?" Jidong gazed at him and said, "Love is not determined by time. For those who are fated, even if it is the first time they meet, they can fall in love at first sight. For those who are not fated, even if they live together for decades, they can only be ordinary friends. Xixian has already made it very clear that she sees you as a brother." Lin Xinyu took a deep breath. At this moment, the surrounding plants seemed to have sensed the rhythm of his breathing. They actually moved along with his breath. The life aura released by these plants was absorbed into his body like a whale sucking in water. It was obvious that this was a special wood-based technique. In an instant, the magical wave released by Lin Qinyu's body increased by a few notches. "Brother Lin, please wait." Just at this moment, a loud shout sounded, and a figure flew to Lin Qinyu's side and grabbed his shoulder. It was none other than Chen Sheng, the crown prince of Dongmu Empire and the eldest brother of Qin Sixuan. Lin Xinyu did not look at him and said, "Your Highness, please don't stop me. I must fight with this man. He took my Sixuan away." Chen Sheng smiled bitterly and said, "Xinyu, this is the Imperial Palace after all. Don't fight. Father already knows that Sixuan is back, and he asked me to take her to see him. Sai, this matter should be decided by the elders. Xinyu, let's go together. Don't worry, we will definitely give you an explanation." Lin Xinyu glanced at Jidong coldly. The next moment, the huge pressure he released disappeared without a trace. He snorted angrily and turned around to leave. Chen Sheng heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Lin Xinyu didn't make a move in the end, and then he gestured to Qin Sixuan and said, "Little sister, quickly come with me. Alas, you've really caused great trouble this time. Oh, you should come along as well." The last sentence was said to Jidong. However, the crown prince was obviously not happy with the brother-in-law his sister brought back. Qin Sixuan held Jidong's hand and shook it slightly. Their souls were connected. Jidong said to you through the soul connection, "Don't worry. Since I have promised you, I will definitely help you." After a while, Jidong and Qin Sixuan arrived at the Jiayi Palace in the center of the Imperial Palace under Qin Sheng's lead. This Jiayi Palace was obviously named after the Eastern Jiayi Wood. Jiayi Palace was the place where the Emperor of Dongmu Empire attended court, and Yi Palace was the place where the Emperor discussed business, which was equivalent to the Emperor's study. The place where Chen Sheng brought Jidong and Qin Sixuan to was the Yi Palace. As for the luxurious palace, Jidong was not in the mood to appreciate it. When they walked into the Yi Palace, he found that there were already many people here. Qin Sixuan wanted to let go of Jidong's hand. After all, she was about to meet her father, so she had to restrain herself a little. However, Jidong held her hand tightly, not letting her let go. At the same time, he sent her a message that he would take care of everything. Although the Yi Palace was not as big as the Jiayi Palace, it was enough to accommodate the emperor and dozens of officials to discuss business. At this moment, in the main seat of the Yi Palace, an old man in his 60s, wearing a dragon robe embroidered with a green dragon, was sitting there. He was the emperor of Dongmu Empire, Chun Xiaofeng. On the left side of him sat a middle-aged couple of about 5 years old, and Lin Xinyu, whom Jidong had just met. On the other side sat two people. One was a woman wearing a palace dress. She was sitting next to Chun Xiaofeng. From her dress, It could be seen that she was the empress of the Dongmu Empire. If they were discussing military affairs, this empress was obviously not suitable to appear here. However, at this moment, they were dealing with her daughter's marriage, so her participation was very reasonable. Chen Xishuan and the crown prince, Chun Sheng, were both born by this empress. Chun Xiaofeng invited the empress, naturally, to make his daughter restrain herself in the process of discussing the marriage. It could be considered as a painstaking effort. There was another person sitting in the main seat next to the empress. Judging from his age, he seemed to be in his 50s. His appearance was somewhat similar to the emperor. He had a dignified bearing and was dressed luxuriously, like a prince. Seeing this person, Ji Dong couldn't help but think of a person. When he and Flaming Bar saved the entire forest demon tribe, the person they faced was Prince Tianlu of Dongmu Empire. Could it be that this was Prince Tianlu, who controlled the third chamber of commerce in the continent, the Golden Eagle Chamber of Commerce? Ji Dong didn't have a good impression of this person at all. Greetings, father and mother. Chen Sheng and Chen Xishuan knelt on the ground together and saluted. Only Ji Dong was still standing there. He only let go of Chen Xishuan's hand, but he didn't have any intention of kneeling down to greet them. The emperor and his wife's eyes fell on their daughter. Their eyes were a little excited. They hadn't seen their daughter for almost 2 years. How could they not miss her? She was the apple of their eye. It could be said that no one in the entire Dongmu Empire could be compared to Chen Xishuan, the saint of Dongmu Empire. Stand up. Seeing his daughter, although Ji Dong was in a bad mood, Chen Xiaofeng couldn't help but control his emotions. This troublesome matter in front of him had to be solved first. As he spoke, his eyes had already turned to Ji Dong. Looking at Ji Dong's head of white hair, the expression in his eyes slightly changed. He said, "Who are you? Why did you come with my son? Why didn't you kneel when you saw me?" The emperor had the majesty and oppressiveness of the royal family. If it was someone else, although Chen Xiaofeng seemed to be asking a question calmly, it would make people not dare to look at him directly. However, Ji Dong acted as if nothing had happened. He slightly bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty, Her Highness." Chen Xiaofeng fiercely slammed the table and said, "How dare you? Seeing me, you only salute like this?" With both hands behind his back, Ji Dong indifferently smiled and said, "This is enough, because you are Xishuan's parents." The implication was that if the emperor and empress in front of him weren't because of his relationship with Chen Xishuan, he wouldn't even do this simple salute. What a proud brat. Chen Xiaofeng slammed the table in a threatening manner, absolutely not to make things difficult for Ji Dong, but rather for the people next to him to see. At this moment, seeing Ji Dong standing there so proudly, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Regarding his daughter's eyesight, Chen Xiaofeng was still very confident. Such a strange white-haired and youthful person who looked even more arrogant than himself. Just what was his background? It seemed that this matter really couldn't be handled carelessly. Otherwise, it would very easily bring trouble to the empire. At this moment, Chen Xishuan had already stood up and stood at Ji Dong's side. Without waiting for Chen Xiaofeng to open his mouth again, she hastily said, "Father, he is called Ji Dong, my teacher at Blazing Academy and also your son's lover." "Teacher? How old is he? Can he still be a teacher?" Sitting at the side, that 50-year-old man in prince attire opened his mouth. Chen Xishuan quickly introduced him to Hyoheim through the soul fusion. Just as Ji Dong guessed, this person was Prince Tianlu. Chen Xishuan's little mouth slightly pouted, saying, "Ambition doesn't depend on age. Ji Dong is the most outstanding teacher at Blazing Academy." "Enough, Your Majesty. I think we don't need to get entangled in these matters. Regarding Qinyu and Xishuan's marriage, what does Your Majesty have to say?" The middle-aged man sitting at Chen Xiaofeng's left opened his mouth. His voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. His gaze swept over Ji Dong indifferently, not revealing any imposing manner. But when he opened his mouth, he naturally became the focus of everyone present. Chen Xiaofeng frowned slightly, saying, "Don't be impatient, worthy brother. We will definitely give you an explanation on this matter. Xishuan, tell us what's going on between you and this young man called Ji Dong." While speaking, he secretly gave his daughter a meaningful glance. However, Chen Xishuan acted as if she didn't see her father's gaze, slightly bowing towards the couple, saying, "Uncle Lin, Aunt Lin, Xishuan greets you." The woman called Aunt by Chen Xishuan coldly snorted, saying, "We don't deserve it, Your Highness. Let's first explain the matter clearly." Chen Xishuan's voice immediately resounded in Ji Dong's mind. Through Chen Xishuan's introduction, he knew that this couple was Lin Qinyu's parents. The middle-aged man was called Lin Baichuan, and his wife was called Lin Luan. The reason why the wife's surname was also Lin was because of the Lin family's rules. Women who married into the Lin family had to change their surname to Lin. If she really married Lin Qinyu, it would be the same. From the fact that Lin Luan dared to provoke Chen Xishuan without any hesitation, one could see how powerful the Lin family was in the Eastern Wood Empire. She didn't give face to the princess in front of the emperor of the Eastern Wood Empire. If it was anyone else, they would have their entire family destroyed. Chen Xishuan didn't care about Lin Luan's reaction. She looked at her father again, saying, "Father, mother, when I first came to Blazing Academy, I became teacher Ji Dong's disciple. When I first met teacher Ji Dong, we fell in love at first sight. Thus, I started to pursue teacher Ji Dong. Finally, not long ago, I obtained teacher Ji Dong's approval, and then we could be together. This time, I came back to explain this matter to father and mother. My feelings for brother Qinyu have always been like that of a brother and sister. We are not suitable to be husband and wife. Uncle Lin, Aunt Lin, I'm really sorry." Chen Xishuan's words stunned everyone present. Although they vaguely knew about the relationship between Chen Xishuan and Ji Dong, who would have thought that it was Chen Xishuan who took the initiative to pursue him and even pursued him for more than a year before he agreed. For a moment, whether it was Emperor Chen Xiaofeng or Lin Baichuan and his wife, their faces were extremely ugly. Chapter 465. "Impossible, I don't believe it," Lin Xinyu said angrily. "Xishuan, who do you think you are? How could you go after this white-hair guy? He must have done something to you. Tell us. We will help you." Chen Xishuan shook her head gently and said, "I'm sorry, brother Qinyu. I have told you very clearly just now. I am with Ji Dong because I really love him. I just want to be with him. This is my biggest wish in this life. I know you like me too, but I can only let you down." "Shut up." Chen Xiaofeng couldn't bear it anymore. He slammed the table and stood up. He glared at his daughter and said, "Xishuan, do you know what you're talking about? You and Qinyu have been childhood sweethearts since you were young. Your uncle Lin and I arranged this marriage for you two. Now that the wedding is approaching, you want to break off the engagement? I will never allow it. The marriage between children has always been decided by parents, not to mention you are a princess. You don't need to say anything. The marriage will not change. You must and can only marry Qinyu. Someone, take the princess away and kick this white-haired guy out of the palace. Oh no, directly out of Dongmu City." Chen Xiaofeng couldn't let his daughter continue talking. The Lin family was too important to Dongmu Empire. Lin Baichuan and Lin Luan were obviously on the verge of breaking out. If they were allowed to speak again, there would be no room for reconciliation. At that time, it would be a disaster for the whole empire. For the sake of the country, he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice his daughter's happiness. Moreover, he didn't think that Ji Dong could bring more happiness to his daughter than Lin Qinyu. In his heart, he had been thinking that it must be his daughter's impulsive decision. She didn't know how to judge a man. Everything would be over after she and Lin Qinyu got married. Lin Luan still wanted to say something, but Lin Baichuan stopped her. Lin Baichuan was also suppressing his anger. Chen Xiaofeng's way of handling this matter was the best he could do. If this matter were to escalate, not only the Lin family would lose face, but the relationship between the Lin family and the imperial family would also deteriorate. This was also the situation that he didn't want to see. His thoughts are the same as Chen Xiaofeng. Time could wash away everything. As long as the marriage didn't change, today's matter could be considered as barely resolved. After hearing Chen Xiaofeng's words, Lin Qinyu's face finally relaxed a little. He held one of his mother's hands with a pleading look on his face. He really liked Chen Xishuan. As long as he could marry Chen Xishuan, He didn't care about such an interlude. Following Emperor Chun Xiaofeng's order, more than 10 silhouettes immediately flashed in from outside. 4 of them were women, and they quickly surrounded Chun Sichuan's side. The other 8 men were all over 40 years old, and it was obvious that their magic power cultivation was above 6 crowns, and they surrounded Jidong. "Father, you can't do this," Qin Sichuan angrily said. "I will marry whoever I like. You can't force me." Qin Xiaofeng was furious. He waved his hand and said, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take the princess away." "Yes, your majesty." The 4 women stepped forward at the same time and got closer to Qin Sichuan. They respectfully said, "Your Highness, please." Qin Sichuan coldly snorted and said, "You want to take me away with just you?" As she said that, her clear eyes glowed with a green light. An incomparably powerful aura suddenly burst out from her body. Not only the 4 female evil masters around her, but also the 8 male evil masters surrounding Ji Dong changed their expressions at the same time. Lin Baichuan's and Lin Luan's gazes froze at the same time and fell on Qin Sichuan. Their eyes were full of surprise. Qin Sichuan did not release her yin yang crown. What she released was her own devil attribute, ultimate Yiwood. The effect was also the attribute suppression produced by the ultimate devil attribute. Under such a strong attribute suppression, the faces of the 4 female devil masters beside her, who were only 6 crowns, immediately changed. They subconsciously took a few steps back, not daring to make a move. Qin Xiaofeng was also shocked by this change. Extreme attribute? How can my daughter have an extreme attribute? For a moment, following the release of Qin Sichuan's extreme Yiwood magic, the atmosphere in the palace suddenly became strange. Qin Sichuan loudly said, "Father, you don't want me to be with Jidong because you don't want to offend the Lin family. I'm not a good daughter. I can't listen to you on this matter. If you insist on me marrying Brother Qinyu, then I can only run away with Jidong." Jidong stood beside Qin Sichuan, listening to her words. He didn't know why, but his heart didn't feel good. He knew Qin Sichuan's feelings for him. Usually, she was so gentle and lovely. She never spoke so loudly. But at this moment, in order to fight for this love that she might never be able to fulfill, she didn't hesitate to fall out with her father. This friendship made Jidong's heart feel heavy. You're rebelling. Take them both down." Qin Xiaofeng was also angry. As the emperor, his authority was repeatedly challenged by his daughter, especially in front of the Lin family and his younger brother, who was obviously gloating. Qin Xiaofeng's anger was already burning. They were inside the palace. These devil masters didn't dare to destroy anything here. Therefore, when they attacked, although they had released their yin-yang crown, they only used their magic power internally. None of them dared to use magic power to attack. Jidong hugged Qin Sichuan with one hand, and with a light fling, he sent her 10 meters away, landing outside of the circle. At this moment, he was the only one left to face the attacks of the 12 people in front of him. 1 against 12, and 12 at the level of 6 crowns. This kid must be crazy. Among the crowd, almost everyone had the same thought. But the next moment, their eyes were frozen. At the same time, Jidong threw Qin Sichuan away. He took a step forward and, at the same time, lightly hit the fist of a devil master who was attacking him. A strange scene appeared. No one saw any magic light appear on Jidong's body. But the next moment, the devil master's fist collided with his palm. He didn't even make a sound before he gently fell to the ground. Jidong's body did not stop. He had already used the flying snake flash in a small area. His body moved like lightning. Although the distance he moved back was only 1 meter, it was enough for him to easily dodge the attacks of the other 11 people. Then, everyone only saw a blur in front of their eyes. Jidong's hands had already hit a total of 11 palms. Each palm hit a level 6 perfection devil master. His movements were too fast. Even if they wanted to dodge, it was impossible. The 11 of them all followed in the footsteps of the first demon master. One by one, they fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, their faces turned pale. What was even more shocking was that they only fell to the ground. They didn't seem to have suffered any injuries. The ones who spoke were all wood element demon masters. They could naturally feel that the 12 demon masters who attacked Ji Dong didn't have any changes in their vital signs. They were exactly the same as before. What is going on? To them, even Lin Baichuan and his wife, everything that happened in front of them was extremely strange. Lin Baichuan believed that he could also defeat the 12 devil masters who were afraid of him in one move. However, he couldn't defeat his opponents like Ji Dong and make them lose the ability to fight again without hurting them. What was going on? Sorcery. The queen's cultivation was the lowest among the people. She almost cried out in surprise at the first moment. However, her cry was obviously recognized by everyone. Other than sorcery, they really couldn't think of how Ji Dong could do this at his age. Lin Xinyu even shouted directly. Sichuan must have been enchanted by his sorcery. Ji Dong snorted disdainfully and said, "You want to be with Sichuan with your little knowledge?" From the beginning to the end, he didn't release his yin-yang crown. He had the divine yin-yang lock technique that Flaming Bar taught him. If he didn't want others to see his cultivation level, he definitely wouldn't let anyone see it. With his current cultivation level, even if it was a supreme expert, he wouldn't be able to do it. The 12 devil masters from before only had the cultivation of 6 crowns. Compared to Ji Dong, they were really too weak. The reason why Ji Dong was able to do this was because when he attacked, he had the assimilation formation of the 5 elements formation in the palm of his hand. Every slap of his palm would assimilate the opponent's demonic energy, causing them to temporarily lose their demonic energy. Naturally, they would also lose the ability to attack. Of course, this method could only be used on opponents whose cultivation level was far lower than his. Otherwise, it would be impossible to assimilate the opponent's demonic energy. Lin Xinyu snorted angrily. In a flash, he was already in front of Ji Dong. A dazzling green light suddenly exploded from his body. Above his head, a white first with sun crown formed, displaying the cultivation level of 7 crowns. 7 crowns, 2 stars, level 74. At the same time, because of the tyrannical strength shown by Ji Dong, Prince Tianlu had also stood up and quickly came to his brother's side. A large number of imperial guards were summoned, and they surrounded Ji Dong, who was standing in the center. For a time, the surging demonic energy filled the entire palace, and all kinds of opposites were being abused at the same time. As the saying goes, when a rival in love meets, their eyes are exceptionally red. Lin Xinyu didn't have the same taboo as the court devil masters. He made a circle with his hands in front of him, and a loud dragon roar had already sounded. The strong first with demonic energy instantly burst out, converging into the shape of a dragon's head, and went straight to Ji Dong's chest. The green light was extremely condensed, and the treasure light flowed like a real entity. It was full of explosive demonic energy, and even had some characteristics of fire magic. To everyone's surprise, in the face of Lin Xinyu's ultimate attack, Ji Dong actually put his hands behind his back, as if he didn't see it at all. "Ji Dong, be careful." Qin Sichuan couldn't help but exclaim. But the next moment, the dragon-shaped green light had already fiercely imprinted on Ji Dong's chest. The dazzling green light almost instantly spread to every corner of Ji Dong's body, but Ji Dong just stood there proudly. The green light on his body was like lightning, but he didn't move at all, and he didn't even take half a step back. Lin Xinyu saw that Ji Dong actually used his body to block his attack, and he suddenly became bold. The demonic energy in his body was instantly raised to the limit, and 2 consecutive palm strikes hit Ji Dong's chest fiercely. "Humph." Ji Dong snorted, and his footsteps moved slightly. He moved back 2 steps before he could stand firm, and at the same time, he shouted, "Sichuan, don't come over." Chun Sichuan, who was about to rush over, suddenly stopped. She heard Ji Dong say indifferently, "Lin Xinyu, these 3 strikes are Sichuan's apology to you for breaking the promise of marriage. If you attack again, don't blame me for being impolite. He only attacked 3 times for me." In an instant, Qin Sichuan's eyes became misty. At this moment, she seemed to have returned to the days when she was with Ji Dong and lived a happy life every day. She drank the fine wine he made, silently watched him cultivate and felt the deep love he had for her. She thought and thought. She was already crazy. Who needs you to give way? Lin Xinyu was furious. When his attack fell on Ji Dong's body, he clearly felt that Ji Dong's demonic energy was rippling like water. That was the demonic energy of the fire attribute, but it was as gentle as the demonic energy of the water attribute. Lin Xinyu's attack seemed to hit him, but in fact less than 30% of it was injected into his body. What on earth was this person's cultivation? He must know some demonic methods. Or else, why didn't he release the yin-yang crown? If he was really as young as he looked, how could he have a stronger demonic energy than me? The more Lin Xinyu thought about it, the more he felt that Ji Dong was not a normal person. A dazzling cyan flame suddenly burst out from Lin Xinyu's body. He slightly swayed on the spot, leaving a series of residual shadows. His face also became serious, and his hands alternately hit forward. However, he did not hit Hyoheim, but the air in front of him. Chapter 466. Ji Dong clearly sensed that Lin Xinyu's mana was rapidly stacking up in the air as he struck out his palms. His mana was increasing exponentially. This is the Lin family's Thousand Leaves palm. It's a magic skill with multiple attributes. When the Extermination Legion's Thousand Dragons combination skill was improved, the Thousand Leaves palm was influenced by it. Chen Xishuan's reminder reached Ji Dong's ears in time. At this moment, she had just woken up from being moved. She was not worried about Ji Dong's battle with Lin Xinyu. Although Lin Xinyu was a genius and a rare genius from the neighboring family, his opponent was Ji Dong, a holy king who surpassed him in terms of talent and effort. It was undeniable that Lin Xinyu had an extremely important position in the Lin family. Even the two ancestors of the Lin family said that Lin Xinyu's talent was better than theirs when they were young. However, if Yin Zhaoyang and Yin Zhaorong were to evaluate Ji Dong, they would definitely say that his talent was incomparable to that of a human being. Facing Lin Xinyu's Thousand Leaves palm, Ji Dong finally moved his hands behind his back. In the next moment, Lin Baichuan and Lin Luan's expressions changed drastically. What they saw was a figure like a butterfly flying through flowers. Ji Dong's movement was like a dazzling flash of lightning. Even Lin Baichuan and Lin Luan couldn't see how he moved. In a flash of light, Lin Xinyu's thousand-leaf palms, which were quickly overlaying each other, disappeared. With the flying snake flash, Ji Dong's speed was close to teleportation, while the dark moon dance was close to teleportation. When the two skills were combined, their power was naturally extraordinary. If it was half a year ago, Ji Dong wouldn't have reacted like this. However, being tortured by the Dragon Sovereign for half a year wasn't in vain. Being beaten up every day, Ji Dong's combat ability had improved by leaps and bounds. Even under the Dragon Sovereign's domineering pressure, he could still exert his strength, let alone facing an opponent whose cultivation base was lower than his. The flying snake flash, the dark moon dance, and the bright sun hunt were used in one go. Ji Dong's movement was so fast that Lin Xinyu's demonic power could not affect him at all. In a flash, he had already arrived in front of Lin Xinyu and stretched out his right hand to grab Lin Xinyu's throat. At this moment, the demonic power of Lin Xinyu's Thousand Leaves palm was actually behind Ji Dong. In other words, Ji Dong had used Flying Snake Flash and Dark Moon Dance to dodge the Thousand Leaves palm's demon power. He had used his own body to separate Lin Xinyu's body from the demon power released by Lin Xinyu. At the same time, he used Bright Sun Hunt with his right hand and aimed at Lin Xinyu's throat. Lin Xinyu deserved to be the most outstanding disciple of the young generation of Lin family. Without seeing Ji Dong's movement clearly and judging Ji Dong's real strength, his body reacted subconsciously. Even though his mind could not keep up with Ji Dong's movement, his body automatically dodged Ji Dong's attack. At the same time, he resolutely gave up the Thousand Leaves palm and raised his hands. Dense cyan light instantly converged into a cyan light ball in front of him to protect him. He didn't want to make any mistakes, but he wanted to make no mistakes. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ji Dong. The Bright Sun Hunt, as the skill of the Flame Tyrant, was even more powerful than any one of the scorching sun triple strikes. How could it be so easy to dodge? Jidong slid forward, and his right hand instantly turned golden. He forcibly broke the cyan light ball in front of Lin Qianyu and accurately grabbed his neck. Lin Qianyu's body, which was leaning backward, was directly lifted up and floated in the air. One strike. That's right. Just one strike, and the battle was over. It did not mean that Lin Qianyu was too weak, but it was Jidong's way of attacking. When fighting with him, the whole process will be decided in an instant. However, the outcome of the battle was absolutely shocking to the onlookers. Jidong's golden right hand was filled with demonic power, but the moment he grabbed Lin Qianyu, all his meridians were sealed, so he could not even struggle. His right hand lifted Lin Qianyu off the ground, but Jidong's eyes were still so calm, as if he had just done something insignificant. The change happened so fast that even Lin Baichuan and his wife could not save their son in time. Seeing Lin Qianyu fall into Jidong's hands, they dared not to act rashly. As long as Jidong exerted a little force, Lin Qianyu would die here. At this moment, Jidong had become the center of attention in the E-Palace. The Imperial Devil Masters around released their coercion without hesitation, trying to oppress Jidong to a certain extent. However, with their cultivation, how could they pose any threat to Jidong? Jidong threw Lin Qianyu's body in front of Lin Baichuan and his wife casually. At the same time, he unsealed Lin Qianyu's meridians. Lin Baichuan grabbed his son's vest with his right hand and put Lin Qianyu beside him. At the same time, he quickly sensed the condition of Lin Qianyu's bloodline. After making sure that his son was fine, he was relieved. Demonic magic. He must have used demonic magic. Lin Qianyu could no longer keep calm like he did when he first saw Jidong. He seemed to be hysterically excited. It was no wonder that he was like this. Since he was young, he had been the pride of the family and the most outstanding genius. He was only 27 years old this year, but he had already become the leader of the younger generation in the family. His strength was even close to that of his father's generation. The blow in front of him was too heavy for him. Facing Jidong, he felt that he didn't have the slightest ability to fight back. Enough! Lin Baichuan shouted in a low voice and slapped Lin Qianyu's face with the back of his hand. Lin Qianyu staggered and his voice stopped. Lin Qianyu stared blankly at his father. Since he was young, it was the first time that his father had hit him like this. For a moment, the huge difference stunned him, and he stood there, unable to say a word. Lin Baichuan and his wife, Lin Luan, walked forward slowly and stopped 10 meters away from Jidong. Under the gazes of many Imperial Devil Masters, Emperor Dongmu, Chen Xiaofeng, and Prince Tianlu, Lin Baichuan actually bowed slightly to Jidong and said in a deep voice, "Thank you for your mercy." Lin Qianyu's mentality was not normal, but Lin Baichuan was a bystander. He could see clearly that although Jidong's strength also shocked him, it was definitely not demonic magic. There was no doubt that there was a huge gap between his son and this person's strength. This was completely a gap in strength. The young man in front of him did not release much demonic power, but Lin Baichuan's heart was filled with a sense of oppression. Looking at Jidong, he could feel a deep sense of threat. He had not felt this kind of situation for a long time. As the current family head of the Lin family, although he had not broken through to the level of a supreme master, this was the first time that he felt so oppressed when facing an opponent other than a supreme master. I have no enmity with him, so naturally, I will not kill him. However, if he continues to pester me, then don't blame me for being rude. Jidong said lightly. Chen Sichuan broke off the engagement because of him, and Jidong also felt a little guilty for Lin Qianyu. Therefore, he did not hit him hard. He did not use his demonic power from the beginning to the end, because he was afraid of hurting Lin Qianyu. Of course, his tolerance was limited. Tyrants were never good-tempered. Lin Baichuan and Lin Luanfu respectively emitted the light of first wood and second wood magic respectively. Lin Baichuan said in a deep voice, "Although your excellency has shown mercy and let my son go, today's matter is related to the reputation of my Lin family. is the greatest shame in the history of the Lin family. If your excellency cannot stay here, then please take our lives. This shame can only be washed with your excellency's blood or our blood. There is no other way. Jidong looked at Lin Baichuan coldly. From his voice, one could hear the determination. Obviously, from the strength that Jidong had shown just now, Lin Baichuan was not confident to face him, so he said such words. Brother, you can't do this. This is the imperial palace of the Dongmu Empire. Naturally, it should be solved by the alliance. Qin Xiaofeng said as he walked out and stood side by side with Lin Baichuan and his wife. Lin Baichuan turned his head and looked at Qin Xiaofeng. He saw the deep apology in Qin Xiaofeng's eyes. His face slightly relaxed, and he said lightly, Qin Yu is not lucky enough to marry Sichuan. That is because he is not charming enough. He can't blame others. His Majesty and I are still brothers. Their marriage cannot affect our brotherhood. After hearing Lin Baichuan's words, both Qin Xiaofeng and Qin Sichuan, who was not far behind Jidong, were greatly relieved. Although Lin Baichuan was angry, he could still maintain such a clear mind. He was worthy of his identity as the family head. However, Lin Baichuan's tone changed. He raised his finger and pointed at Hyoheim. This person and Sichuan came to our palace to break off the engagement in front of His Majesty. This is a great humiliation to our family. Our Lin family cannot tolerate this. Your Majesty, if you still recognize me as your brother, then please don't interfere in this matter. Let our Lin family solve it ourselves. Otherwise, our Lin family will no longer have the face to live in the Dongmu Empire. Brother, why do you have to do this? I will order my men to take him down. Then you can deal with him. Qin Xiaofeng sighed. He sincerely admired Lin Baichuan's actions. Because of this, he was even more angry at Jidong and Qin Sichuan for coming back. Lin Baichuan shook his head and said, I can't judge the strength of this young man. However, there is one thing that I am very clear about. In this place, unless my wife and I take action, His Majesty's men will not be able to take him down. Furthermore, he showed mercy and spared my son's life. No matter what, I must give him a fair chance to fight. At this moment, there was only one thought in Qin Xiaofeng's mind. That was to not let Lin Baichuan lose. Otherwise, it would bring a great disaster to the Dongmu Empire. However, at the same time, Qin Xiaofeng couldn't help but look at Jidong in a new light. Who was this young man that his daughter brought back? He seemed to be in his early 20s, but he was able to defeat Lin Qinyu so easily. Moreover, Lin Baichuan and his wife valued him so much. His cultivation was immeasurable. Such a young man's future was unimaginable. If Qin Xiaofeng had 2 daughters of the Dongmu Saintess, it wouldn't be a problem to marry one of them. This young man's future was boundless. However, at this moment, he only had one choice. Obviously, Jidong was not the one he chose. Lin Baichuan looked at Hyoheim and said, This is the Imperial Palace. It's inconvenient to fight here. How about we go outside? Jidong said indifferently, As you wish. As he spoke, he turned around and walked outside. There seemed to be an invisible pressure spreading from his body. Those palace magicians didn't dare to block his way. Jidong walked to Qin Sichuan's side. Qin Sichuan looked at him with concern. Jidong smiled and shook his head at her. Qin Sichuan immediately understood and nodded at him. The two of them did not speak, but they already understood each other through the exchange of glances. Therefore, Qin Sichuan didn't go out with Jidong. Instead, she stood there with her hands down. She waited quietly for her father and mother to come before she followed them. Qin Xiaofeng glared at his daughter and said, You, what should I say to you? A mother loved her daughter more. The Empress pulled Qin Sichuan into her arms and said in a low voice, Your Majesty, since it has come to this, we can only take one step at a time. It's useless to blame Sichuan. Seeing that Lin Baichuan and his wife had already followed behind Jidong, Qin Xiaofeng lowered his voice and asked his daughter, Sichuan, tell father, what is the identity of this Jidong that you brought back? Qin Sichuan shook her head and said, I'm sorry, father. I can't say. If Jidong is willing, he will tell me himself. If he doesn't say, I can't say more. Otherwise, he won't be happy. Looking at his daughter's obedient appearance, Qin Xiaofeng couldn't help but be at a loss for a moment. He murmured, "A grown girl can't be kept at home." As expected, a grown girl can't be kept at home. Does that brat really have some kind of sorcery to make our little demoness of Tumu so obedient? Father, Qin Sixuan said in a low voice. The Lin family was a frequent visitor of the Tumu Imperial Palace. Naturally, they were very familiar with this place. After leaving the Yi Palace, Lin Baichuan and his wife made an inviting gesture and brought Ji Dong to the west side of the palace. On the west side of the palace, there was a martial arts field. It was a place specially for the children of the royal family to practice. It covered an area of 1 square kilometer and was the largest open space in the palace. It was the most suitable place for a competition. When they arrived at the martial arts field, Lin Baichuan and his wife stopped one after another. Ji Dong also stood in front of them. At this time, Lin Qinyu's face was pale. He looked at Ji Dong from afar with his fists clenched tightly. His eyes were filled with hatred. Chapter 467. How would you like to teach me? Ji Dong asked. Lin Baichuan said in a low voice, I just said, you brought shame to the Lin clan. I will take care of this. Sister Luan, step back. Let me fight to the death with this young man. No, Baichuan, let me do it. Our cultivation levels are about the same. You are the head of the Lin clan. The Lin clan cannot do without you. Lin Luan said hurriedly. Qin Xiaofeng agreed with her. Qin Xiaofeng hoped that Lin Luan would be the one to fight and not Lin Baichuan. If something happened to Lin Luan, at least Lin Baichuan would be there. The relationship between the Imperial clan and the Lin clan would not completely collapse. If something happened to Lin Baichuan, they would be in big trouble. Lin Baichuan shook his head and said, Sister Luan, you don't understand. There are some things a man must do. At that moment, a cold and arrogant voice rang in their ears. You don't need to talk anymore. Come at me together. Lin Baichuan and Lin Luan turned around at the same time and glared at Hyoheim. Lin Baichuan said in a low voice, Young man, do you know what you are saying? Ji Dong said indifferently, Since you have decided that I brought shame to the Lin clan, what does it matter what I say? Seeing that you love each other so much, there is no need to talk anymore. Come at me together. If you lose, I don't want you to use your blood to wash away the shame. I just want you to put an end to Si Xian's marriage. Just don't bother me anymore. Ji Dong's words made Lin Baichuan angry. Ever since he became famous, this was the first time he had been looked down upon like this. In terms of age, they were both in their 50s. In terms of status, Lin Baichuan was the head of the Lin clan. To be asked to fight 1 against 2 by a young man in his 20s, they could no longer suppress the anger in their hearts. Lin Luan shouted angrily. She had already extended her body and raised both of her arms. A dark green light condensed into a huge ball of light and enveloped her body. A milky white flower with 6 petals appeared behind her. It was the transformation of the Yi wood totem 6 directions. On top of Lin Luan's head, the 8-crown 86 Yin corona shone with a gloomy light. As she leaped into the air and released her magic, a large number of plants in the palace began to move according to her rhythm. A strong aura of life gathered above her head like a wave, covering the palace with a layer of dark green light. Under this dark green light, although the sun could still be seen, it was as if everyone was wearing the sunglasses that Ji Dong had in his previous life. Half of the sun's light was blocked. A vibrant aura pervaded the entire martial arts arena. Vaguely, there was Ji Dong felt as if he had arrived in another world. It was no longer a martial arts arena, but a world woven by vines that had grown for thousands of years. Demon area. Ji Dong growled. He definitely wouldn't underestimate Lin Baichuan and his wife. Even though they were both 8-crown demonic masters and not supremes, the demonic masters of these large clans were completely different from normal demonic masters. They had all sorts of secret techniques that had been passed down for hundreds or even thousands of years. Normal demonic masters definitely couldn't compare to them. The same level of demonic power released by them was completely different from that of normal demonic masters. Although his fight with Lin Xinyu seemed easy, Lin Xinyu's reaction speed and demonic power had left a deep impression on Jidong. If it wasn't for his phoenix dance dragon snake transformation and his fusion with the divine flame Saint Monarch armor, those 3 attacks would have been enough to heavily injure him. Even so, there was still a dull pain in his chest. He needed to rely on the life energy of the core of life to heal that slight injury. That's right, demon area 1,000 threads. Brat, I don't kill nameless people. Tell me where you came from. Lin Luan was a hot-tempered iron lady. Being provoked by Jidong like this, she had long since lost her patience. However, she was also very experienced and knew that Jidong would not be easy to deal with. So, she immediately released her demon area. Seeing that his wife had already made her move, Lin Baichuan retreated to the side with a gloomy expression. He observed quietly. The biggest reason why he felt threatened by Jidong was because he and his wife couldn't see through this young man's cultivation. There's no harm in telling you. Jidong stood in the same place. He didn't have any emotional changes because of Lin Luan's 1,000 threads demon area. Today, when I came back with Si Xian, you must think that I'm a brat who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I'm just a commoner. How could I be together with Saint Dongmu? His Majesty also thought the same. In terms of the benefits that I can bring to Dongmu Empire, His Majesty must also think that I am far from being comparable to the Lin family. However, he also guessed that I must have some background. So, he was merciful to me. He only ordered people to drive me out of Dongmu City instead of directly capturing me. Later, when Senior Lin Baichuan wanted to fight with me, His Majesty was in a hurry to make his stand clear and sent people to capture me. Am I right? Jidong's words were very calm, but each of them was extremely sharp and piercing to Qin Xiaofeng's heart. Qin Xiaofeng's face suddenly became gloomy, but he had to admit that what Jidong said was right. Even Lin Luan was not in a hurry to attack. They were all very curious about the background of this white-haired young man. How could they not be surprised when such a young man with such a high cultivation suddenly appeared out of nowhere? Jidong continued, I understand. Even if the power behind me is as powerful as that of Brother Lin Xinyu, Your Majesty will not choose me. Because the Lin family has always been close to the Dongmu Empire, and the Lin family is like the pillar of the empire, the foundation of the Dongmu Empire. However, if I say that the power behind me is at least twice or even several times that of the Lin family, what will Your Majesty think? As soon as Jidong's words came out, Qin Xiaofeng and Lin Baichuan's hearts immediately trembled. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Although they wouldn't completely believe what Jidong said, Jidong was so young and so powerful, no one would believe that he didn't have any power behind him. Jidong made a habitual gesture of putting his hands behind his back. He looked up at Lin Luan in the sky and said, I'm not saying this to avoid this battle, nor am I hoping that His Majesty will change his mind. I just want to tell everyone that Si Xian following me is not a disgrace to her identity as the Saintess of Dongmu. So, let me introduce myself in detail. My name is Jidong. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the surname. Qin Xiaofeng was shocked and couldn't help but ask, You are from the imperial family of the Empire of Central Earth? Jidong nodded and said, That's right. My grandfather is the Prince of Equality of the Empire of Central Earth. My elder brother is the current Crown Prince of the Empire of Central Earth, Ji Yesheng. Hearing this, Qin Xiaofeng felt as if something had exploded in his mind. His vision turned blank, and he couldn't speak. Even Lin Baichuan felt the same. In an instant, his expression changed greatly. The resolute look on his face disappeared without a trace. Tyrant? You are the tyrant who created the 5 elements cycle formation? The tyrant who united the evil master and the chief elder of the Elder Council? Prince Tianlu cried out involuntarily. Jidong nodded and said indifferently, That's right. The 5 elements cycle formation was created by me. My great-grandfather is Ji Changxin of the Heavenly Dipper. My great-grandmother is Shangwan Yinkong of the Great Fortune. My grandmaster is Yin Zhaoyang of the Victorious Light. My master's wife is Yin Zhaorong of the Great Unity. As for myself, I am the Yin Yang double fire of the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciple. After Xian followed me, she also joined the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciple and is now known as the Heavenly Stem Holy Disciple. As Ji Dong spoke, a strong demonic power was suddenly released from his body. Gold and black flames burned on both sides of his body. He was still in the Thousand Threads demonic domain, but Lin Luan's Thousand Threads demonic domain did not seem to have any effect on him. What a joke! Ji Dong had been beaten up by the Dragon Emperor's Dragon, Diamond, Tyrannical Demon domain almost every day for the past 6 months. His resistance to domains had increased exponentially. An 8-crown Devil Master's demonic domain was not a big threat to him. Until now, Ji Dong had not released his Yin-Yang crown. However, his strong ultimate dual fire had already told Chun Xiaofeng his identity. As an emperor, he was naturally a wise person. Otherwise, he would not have inherited the throne. However, at this moment, Emperor Dongmu could not say a word. He had completely lost his judgment of the situation in front of him. Tyrant Ji Dong. Yes, I should have thought of this name long ago. Since the 5 elements mutual generation and circulation formation was spread, the word tyrant had been well known on the continent, far more than the name Thunder Emperor. However, most people only knew the word tyrant, but not Ji Dong's real name. Therefore, when Chun Xiaofeng heard the name Ji Dong, he did not think much about it. At this moment, when he thought of the word tyrant, Chun Xiaofeng's mind became extremely complicated. No wonder he was so powerful at such a young age. No wonder he was so powerful at such a young age. There were 4 supreme masters behind him. He himself was also an extraordinary figure. He had gone to the Holy Evil Island twice and survived the Great Tribulation of the Holy Evil Island. What's more, he created the 5 elements mutual generation and circulation formation. As the leader of the Heavenly Stem Saints, each of these titles was shocking enough. If the continent were to select the most influential young man under the age of 50, no one could compete with him. No wonder his daughter fell in love with him at first sight. Lin Xinyu was outstanding, but compared with this tyrant in front of her, there was a huge gap between them. Why didn't I think of it before? Chun Xiaofeng regretted in his heart. He dared to follow Xian back to the palace alone, knowing that Xian has a fiancée here. This courage is not possessed by ordinary people. What Chun Xiaofeng could think of course Lin Baichuan could also think of. He knew that this time the Lin family was really in trouble, and this trouble was even more tricky. If they let Ji Dong go and let him be with Chun Sichuan, how would the Lin family be able to face others in the future? However, what could they do if they didn't let Ji Dong go? Not to mention whether they could keep him or not. The power behind this guy was something that the entire Lin family couldn't afford to offend. What should they do? A huge question mark arose in Lin Baichuan's heart. No matter who you are, I won't let you go since you have taken my daughter-in-law away from me. Lin Luan shouted angrily. Her body soared into the air again, and her eyes flashed with electricity. She waved her hands in front of her, and suddenly, a strong green light flashed. A huge green bird appeared under her body. The green bird was 8 meters long, and its wingspan was 10 meters. When it appeared, it seemed to cover the sky. After carrying Lin Luan's body, its wings shook violently, and its huge body shot towards Ji Dong like an arrow. Hearing his wife's words, Lin Baichuan's heart suddenly brightened up. Yes, no matter what, it was this guy who took my daughter-in-law away from me. Logically speaking, my side isn't at a disadvantage. No matter what, I'll teach this guy a lesson first. Thinking of this, his heart felt a bit relieved. In fact, when he thought of this, his hostility towards Ji Dong had clearly weakened. As the head of the Lin family, he didn't want to cause trouble that could lead to the extinction of the Lin family. At the same time that the green bird moved, Lin Luan's Thousand Threads demonic domain also moved. Within the dark green demonic domain, streaks of dark green light surged. They were like huge vines that wrapped around Ji Dong from all directions. With regard to the demonic domain, Ji Dong had received detailed guidance from Yin Zhaoyang. The reason why the demonic domain could become the symbol of an 8-crown demon master and could greatly increase the power of an 8-crown demon master was because the demonic domain did not require the demon master to release too much demon power to support it. The so-called demonic domain was the 8 crowned demon masters using their own abilities to communicate with the power of heaven and earth, creating a certain resonance. In a true sense, it was a method that borrowed the power of heaven and earth to attack and defend. The more powerful the demonic domain, the larger the area it covered, and the more difficult it was to control. Those thick, dark green rays of light drew support from the rich wooded tribute life aura in the air of the Easternwood Empire. Without a doubt, it was much easier for a wood attribute magician to display their strength in the Easternwood Empire than in other countries. Lin Wan did not expect her Thousand Threads demonic domain to be able to directly lock onto Jidong. As long as it could affect his movements and prevent him from displaying the speed he had displayed earlier, it would be enough. Seeing that Jidong had yet to release the Yin-Yang crown, Lin Wan could not help but reveal a cold smile. Kid, even if you have ultimate demon power, there's no way you can win in such a careless situation. Just as the Thousand Threads demonic domain was about to wrap around him, Jidong's eyes suddenly lit up. Immediately after, the ultimate dual flames burning around his body instantly condensed behind him. It was the pattern of the yin-yang fire formation. In an instant, the dense ultimate demon power aura increased exponentially, and the ultimate dual fire attribute suppression was fully released in the arena. Chapter 468. The strong attribute suppression did not seem to be affected by Lin Wan's Thousand Threads of demonic domain at all. The gigantic green bird was carrying Lin Wan, intending to take the opportunity when Jidong was surrounded by the demonic domain to defeat him with a single strike. She wanted to get back at Jidong for killing Lin Qinyu in an instant. In Lin Wan's mind, her understanding of Jidong was far from enough. In her opinion, no matter how much of a genius Jidong was, his cultivation was only slightly higher than her son's. In the previous battle, it was only because Jidong was better at speed that he managed to catch her son off guard, which allowed him to win so easily. At this moment, Lin Wan suddenly felt the strong pressure from Jidong's ultimate dual fire, and her heart clenched. Only then did she realize that the young man in front of her was not as simple as she thought. The powerful attribute suppression made her feel suffocated. Unlike Chen Sichuan's ultimate E-Wood demon, Jidong's ultimate dual fire had a certain restraining effect on the wood element, not to mention that he was a dual yin and yang elemental existence. With the suppression, Lin Wan had no choice but to use at least 30% of her demon power to protect herself, in case she was affected by the attribute suppression and caused her demon power to become chaotic. If that happened, there was no point in continuing the battle. After withstanding the attribute suppression from Jidong, Lin Wan unleashed all her power, including the power of the demonic domain, to the maximum. Not only did the green bird not weaken, but it became even faster. Layers of dark green light gushed out from Lin Wan's body and covered the green bird's body. It was a special kind of thin and slender vines. These vines were solid, and as they stuck close to the green bird, they actually isolated Jidong's attribute suppression. The thin vines that Lin Wan used came from a seed called the ghost silk vine. As long as it was activated by E-Wood mana, the ghost silk vine seed would grow rapidly and become as thin as steel. This vine had a special characteristic, and that was its toughness. It was not only reflected in its body, but also in its ability to isolate any attribute of mana. No matter what attribute of mana a skill was, as long as it landed on the vine, it would be greatly reduced. Unless the attack power exceeded its limit, the Ghost Silk Vine was an excellent mana weapon and armor. Of course, it needed E-Wood mana to sustain it. Once it lost its mana, it would quickly wither. In order to defeat Jidong as soon as possible and restore the Lin family's face, Lin Wan could be said to have put in a lot of effort. The Ghost Silk Vine seeds were not easy to obtain. She used more than 10 of them at once, and under the activation of her mana, they completely covered the green bird. With the protection of the Ghost Silk Vine, Jidong's attribute suppression was no longer a threat to the green bird. Its huge body swooped down, and it looked as if it wanted to destroy Jidong in an instant. an 8-crown demon master, and a class 9 magical beast. How terrifying was their combined attack power? Even the spectators in the distance couldn't help but change their expressions. The one with the most interesting expression was the Emperor of the Easternwood Empire. Qin Xiaofeng hoped that Lin Luan could win, but he also hoped that Jidong wouldn't be hurt. For a moment, only he could understand his complicated feelings. The green bird's sudden acceleration immediately alerted Jidong. With his amazing eyesight, he clearly saw that Lin Luan had used the ghost silk vine to cover the green bird's body. Although he didn't know what the ghost silk vine was, he could guess that it was to resist his attribute's oppression. His eyes narrowed, and Jidong was ready to attack. If he didn't attack and let the opponent's momentum rise to the peak, he would also be in trouble. After all, he was facing an 8-crown expert from an aristocratic family, and he was riding a 9th-grade magical beast. However, right at this moment, Jidong suddenly felt an agitation in his chest. Two extremely excited emotions were being transmitted from the core of life in his chest. Feeling this emotional fluctuation, Jidong felt a sudden warmth in his heart. It was Maotai and Wuliangya. They usually wouldn't be like this. Today, it was because he had suffered some minor injuries and needed time to recover, so he took the initiative to ask to fight. Jidong didn't disappoint the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's goodwill. He withdrew the mana he had gathered and connected his mind with the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. He raised the core of life in front of his chest, and 2 resonant dragon roars rang out. A beam of black and white light shot out from his chest like a bolt of lightning. This beam of light expanded in the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it had already grown to more than 17 meters in length. The enormous body and the extremely shocking dragon roar startled the blue bird that was diving down, and it immediately slowed down a little. When everyone saw the appearance of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Who had ever seen such a strange dragon? Everything else aside, just the fact that it could fly without wings and had 2 large heads was enough to shock everyone. As soon as the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon appeared, its 2 heads and 4 eyes glowed brightly. Its arrogance was even greater than that of Jidong's. With a sway of its body, it was already charging towards the diving green bird. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon didn't know how to restrain itself like Jidong. From the beginning until now, Jidong hadn't used his full strength. The reason was very simple. After all, this was the opponent's territory. Holding back a bit of strength would be useful at a critical moment. He couldn't let the opponent easily figure out his strength. After all, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon wasn't a human, and it hadn't reached the 10th grade yet. Its intelligence wasn't inferior to that of a human's. When faced with an enemy, what it needed to do was use the fastest and fiercest method to defeat the enemy. When its huge body that was 17 meters long swayed in the air, there was an obvious explosion in the air. The strength of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's swaying body could be seen from the battle with the Dragon Emperor in the Dragon Valley. With the combination of the vibration of its body and the talent of transmigration, even the Dragon Emperor's dragon drill and tyrannical demonic domain couldn't stop them, let alone today. Although they were still at the 9th grade, compared to half a year ago, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon First Scripture had been reborn. Even the Dragon Kings weren't willing to spar with them. Explosive power, ruthless attacks, and persistent attacks. These were the adjectives that the Dragon Clan used to describe them. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon sped up and used Jidong's Flying Snake Flash. The bluebird had been diving downwards, so the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon sped up and arrived next to the bluebird. The bluebird obviously saw the appearance of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, but never thought that it would arrive so quickly. The Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon and the bluebird were both magical beasts, so the connection between them was naturally even stronger. The bluebird could obviously sense the terror of the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. Although she had been frightened, she still had her human companion on her back, so the bluebird was not afraid for a moment. It opened its mouth, and a streak of azure light shot towards the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon. At the same time, It came to a screeching halt in the air, perfectly displaying its strength as a Class 9 magical beast. It turned its body halfway, and the right half of its huge wing directly swung towards the sacred evolution fire dragon. The blue bird's wing was no different from a 5-meter wide axe. With a large amount of wood attributed magical energy, its wing was as tough as steel. Even if there was a small mountain in front of it, it would still be chopped in half by its wing. The bluebird's response was without a doubt excellent. The streak of light had already arrived in front of the sacred evolution fire dragon. The sacred evolution fire dragon's eyes narrowed, and it opened its mouth to suck in the 5-grain liquid. At the same time, a strange black halo appeared behind it. A strange scene occurred. Lin Luan was shocked to find that the azure light from the blue bird had been directly swallowed by the strange black dragon's head. If the sacred evolution fire dragon had only blocked the blue bird's attack, Lin Luan wouldn't have been surprised at all. However, it had been swallowed just like that. This left her completely dumbfounded. It was the same assimilation spell, but when used on the sacred evolution fire dragon, its effect was even greater than that of Jidong's. The 5-grain liquid swallowed the green light in one gulp, and the sacred evolution fire dragon's body also froze in midair. Everyone could clearly hear a loud explosion in the air. The sacred evolution fire dragon's huge body seemed to completely defy the laws of physics. It suddenly swung its huge dragon tail upwards, meeting the blue bird's wing head-on. In terms of body length, the sacred evolution fire dragon was almost twice the length of the bluebird. Not only was its huge tail terrifyingly powerful, it was also extremely fast. It struck the side of the blue bird's wing heavily, and the explosion in the air was the sound of the dragon's tail tearing through the air. The violent explosion was accompanied by a large amount of magical ripples in the air. Large amounts of dark green light were released in the air. When Lin Luan realized that something was wrong, she had already poured all of her magical power into the blue bird's body. However, she had still underestimated the sacred evolution fire dragon's strength. Yes, the sacred evolution fire dragon was also a Class 9 magical beast, but it was a Class 9 magical beast with extreme magical power. Furthermore, they were 2 bodies in one. Even a Class 10 dragon would have to take a detour when facing the sacred evolution fire dragon, let alone the bluebird. When the blue bird's wing collided with the sacred evolution fire dragon's tail, it was like a dragonfly trying to shake a stone pillar. The blue bird's huge body was like a broken kite, sent flying into the air by the sacred evolution fire dragon's tail. All Lin Luan could do was hold on tightly to the blue bird's body to prevent herself from falling. Roar! The Maotai and 5-grain liquid let out proud roars. Jidong, who was watching from below, suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. He cursed inwardly, but it was already too late to stop them. As they roared, the Maotai and 5-grain liquid each spat out a powerful ball of light, chasing after the blue bird that had been sent flying in the air. Crap! Lin Baichuan had already sensed that something was wrong when he saw the 2 balls of light, but both he and Jidong were on the ground. It was already too late to stop them. Stop! Jidong shouted. His soul vibrated directly in the minds of the Maotai and 5-grain liquid. The sacred evolution fire dragon froze for a moment. The 2 balls of light that it had spat out were about to catch up to Lin Luan, but under their powerful control, they drew an arc in the air and flew higher before colliding. Suddenly, the heavens and the earth shook. The moment the black and white lights collided, Lin Luan's 1,000 threads of demonic domain was crushed into powder. The bright sun in the sky seemed to have shifted, and on the other side, a dark moon rose. The strong black and white light intertwined in the air to form the shape of a Tai Chi, circling in the air. The suffocating pressure fell upon the ground. In an instant, the ordinary servants and guards all fell to the ground. Even the demon masters all paled. They used all their strength to release their demonic energy in an attempt to resist the pressure descending from the sky. However, the gap between them was too big. How could they resist this power? Even though it was only a pressure descending from the sky, The demon masters under the level of 6 crowns were all paralyzed on the ground, unable to resist. Super sure kill technique. Lin Baichuan clenched his fists tightly as he said each word slowly. The black and white Tai Chi pattern did not just shock him. A super sure kill technique. It was only a super sure kill technique performed by a magical beast, and it looked like the magical beast had only used a small amount of its power. No wonder this young man was called a tyrant and was so respected. Anyone else with such a powerful magical beast that was no lower than a rank 10 magical beast would also attract attention. Naturally, Lin Baichuan was not the only one who was shocked. Chun Xiaofeng was even more dumbfounded at this time. He began to regret in his heart. He regretted his previous attitude towards Ji Dong. He followed Xi back alone and broke into the palace alone. It was not because of arrogance, but because of self-confidence. It seemed that he had to reevaluate the strength of this young man. The cyan bird struggled to control its body in the air, but it didn't dare to move. Lin Luan desperately injected her demonic energy into the cyan bird's body to keep it floating in the air. The cyan bird's right wing, which had collided with the sacred evolution fire dragon, was now comminuted. This was because it was covered by the ghost silk vine. Otherwise, not only would the cyan bird's life be taken away, but Lin Luan would also suffer. This kind of ordinary level 9 wood element demon beast. How could the sacred evolution fire dragon care about it? In Eastwood City, the commoners were all looking up at the sky. The immense pressure was so great that they did not even dare to breathe. Even though the black and white halo was high up in the sky, every single one of them could clearly feel the destructive power contained in the black and white halo. Without a doubt, what the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon had just used was the sure kill technique that it had learned from Ji Dong, Sun and Moon Yin-Yang boundary. Mao Tai and Wu Yangye each spat out brilliant sun all in Yuyan ice, condensing into a sure kill technique in the air. With the continuous increase in strength of Ji Dong and the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon, their dual attribute ability was gradually displayed. The power of their Yin and Yang dual attribute combination skill made them far superior to the same level. Moreover, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon swept its tail like a heavy hammer. If the sure kill technique really hit, Lin Luan and the Cyan Bird would have to say goodbye. Chapter 469. As Lin Baichuan roared, a crack appeared in the sky 10 meters in front of him, and a huge green figure flashed out. In the blink of an eye, it appeared out of thin air. With a loud bang, it landed in front of Lin Baichuan. It was a huge green dragon. This was not the Emerald Lizard Dragon King that Ji Dong had seen Shen Longgao ride before, but a real dragon, a member of the Green Dragon clan. Because the Green Dragon King was one of the heavenly stem mythological beasts, the Green Dragon clan's status rose with it. As long as the Green Dragon was of the Yang attribute, it would be superior to the Diamond Dragon clan. Lin Baichuan was able to have a Green Dragon as his mount because of his status as the head of the Lin clan. Lin Baichuan soared up and landed on the Azure Dragon's neck. His aura instantly increased as the level 88 Firstwood Sun Crown appeared above his head. The Azure Dragon was connected to his mind. It soared into the sky and arrived in the blink of an eye. Rays of azure light were emitted from Lin Baichuan's hands and fell on the Azure Bird, helping his wife stabilize the Azure Bird's injuries. The healing ability of the Yin and Yang wood attribute magic was fully exerted, allowing the Azure Bird to slowly descend to the ground. However, Lin Baichuan and Lin Luan could both feel that the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon's tail hammer had already injured the Azure Bird's foundation. Not only were the wings crushed and fractured, even the internal organs had many traces of rupture. It would not be a matter of a day and night to completely cure it, and it was even possible that it could not be cured. Lin Baichuan looked at Ji Dong standing in the arena with a complicated expression. At this time, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon had returned to Ji Dong's side. Its huge body hovered behind Ji Dong. Its 9 claws landed on the ground, and its black and white dragon heads were raised high. With it in the background, Ji Dong did not look so lonely. Thank you for showing mercy once again. However, This battle between us must continue, said Jiang Chun with a smile. As he said this, Lin Baichuan's face revealed a tinge of shame. He had no choice but to join forces with his wife to deal with Ji Dong. If they did not fight in front of the Dongmu Empire's royal family and did not regain their dignity, how could the Lin family establish themselves in the Dongmu Empire in the future? This was no longer a simple matter. It was because of the marriage between Chun Sixuan and Lin Qinyu, and it involved his entire clan. Therefore, even if he knew he shouldn't do it, he had no choice but to make such a decision. When Lin Baichuan and Hyoheim spoke, the azure dragon beneath them naturally saw the sacred evolution fire dragon. Mao Tai's big white head stared at the azure dragon that was slowly descending from the sky. Seeing the azure dragon looking at it, Mao Tai let out a low roar, and a special aura had already spread out from its body. The azure dragon's body trembled. Its cultivation was still at the 9th level, and it could not speak, but in the next moment, it suddenly accelerated and landed on the ground in the blink of an eye. Its huge body shook, and Lin Baichuan, who was on its back, bounced up and let out a deep dragon roar. The sudden change shocked Lin Baichuan, and he said, "Brother Dragon, you roar." The azure dragon let out another low roar. The others did not understand what the azure dragon was saying, but Lin Baichuan, who had a contract with it, naturally understood what the azure dragon was saying. He immediately lost his voice and said, "Brother Dragon, what did you say? This is the royal family of the Dragon Clan. You can't make an enemy out of them?" The azure dragon nodded apologetically at Lin Baichuan, then turned around and nodded respectfully at the sacred evolution fire dragon. With a sudden burst of power from its hind legs, it spread its wings and soared into the sky, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Lin Baichuan had painstakingly sacrificed his pride to raise a sliver of fighting spirit, but with the departure of the azure dragon, his face was completely drained of blood. The azure bird was heavily injured, and the azure dragon had left. Could they really defeat the young man in front of them with just the two of them? At this moment, he no longer had any confidence in himself, and the way he looked at Ji Dong also began to become confused. "Senior, do you still want to fight?" Ji Dong asked calmly. If it had been his usual temperament, he would not have let the sacred evolution fire dragon attack at this moment. He would have fought against the two of them alone. However, the situation was different. He had helped Chun Sixuan to break off the engagement, which was not in the right. He naturally hoped that the battle would end here and not continue. Otherwise, it would not benefit anyone if it continued. This was also the reason why he had not been ruthless. The azure bird had already landed, and Lin Luan leapt to her husband's side. She looked at Lin Baichuan with concern. She had not seen her husband's face so drained of blood for a long time. She knew that her husband's heart was in great torment. "Baichuan, Lin Luan was about to say something when Lin Baichuan interrupted her. "Sister Luan, are you afraid of death?" Lin Baichuan stared at his wife, his eyes filled with deep emotions. Lin Luan was slightly stunned, but she quickly shook her head and said, "If I can die with you, I'm not afraid." Lin Baichuan laughed. "All right, Lin Baichuan, have a wife like this in my life. What more can I ask for? If I, the head of the family, cannot protect the honor of the family, then I will die fighting for the family on this battlefield. Apart from that, there is no other way out. Let's join forces and fight against this tyrant." Looking at Lin Baichuan, Ji Dong could not help but frown. How could he not see that Lin Baichuan had already decided to die? An opponent like this would undoubtedly be able to unleash his full strength, but Ji Dong did not want to kill them. Lin Luan raised her hand and held her husband's. The couple looked at each other and calmed down. They smiled at each other, as if the current situation was no longer important to them. Being able to be together was more important than anything else. "Dad, Mom." Lin Xinyu came out from the side and came to his parents' side. He had mixed feelings and said, "I'm sorry, Dad, Mom. It's all because of me that the family is in such a difficult situation. Let your son fight together with you. Even if we die, we could die together." Lin Baichuan laughed and patted his son's shoulder. "Good, you are indeed my son. Let's fight together." While talking, the family of three had already walked towards Ji Dong. Chun Xiaofeng, who was watching the battle from the back, did not stop them. Instead, he had a strange expression on his face. The way the three of them looked at death, as if they were going to go home, was very touching. However, Lin Baichuan was only one person. This was not a fair battle. The reason why Lin Baichuan and his wife could still fight without any shame could only mean one thing. They had already regarded Ji Dong as an opponent who was much stronger than them. What did it mean to be stronger than them? It meant to be a supreme being. This young man was only in his 20s. Did he really have the same strength as a supreme being? At this moment, a thunderous voice suddenly came from the sky. Enough! Haven't you embarrassed yourselves enough? This voice seemed to come from all directions. As it sounded, the entire Easternwood Imperial Palace seemed to tremble. In the distance, a green light fell from the sky and landed right in front of Lin Baichuan and his wife. Then, another dark green light fell beside the green light. Ji Dong's calm eyes suddenly became serious. He was no longer as relaxed as before. When these two figures appeared, Ji Dong was not the only one who felt nervous. Lin Baichuan and his family suddenly knelt on the ground. Lin Baichuan's voice even trembled as he said, "Grandpa." After the green light fell, a person appeared. This person was more than 2 meters tall. His limbs were thick and slender. His long green hair looked like a bird's nest. At this moment, he was facing Ji Dong. He did not even look at Lin Baichuan, who was behind him. He said, "I don't have such a shameful grandson like you. Take your wife and son and get out of here. From now on, you're no longer the master of the Lin family." "Yes, Grandpa." Lin Baichuan did not even dare to explain. He held Lin Luan and Lin Xinyu with both hands and quickly retreated to the side. Standing beside the green-haired old man was an old woman. Her long, dark green hair was much neater. If one were to look at her from behind, no one would be able to tell her age. Unfortunately, time waited for no man. The wrinkles on her face were the marks left behind by them. These are the two ancestors of the Lin family, Lin Yilei and Lin Qing. They are also the pillars of the Dongmu Empire. Chen Xiaofeng greets the two majesties. While Chen Xishuan was explaining to Ji Dong, Chen Xiaofeng had already walked up with his subordinates and respectfully saluted Lin Yilei and his wife. "Your Majesty, I don't deserve such a big bow. I've heard everything. The marriage between Si Xian and Qianyu is over. Our Lin family will never force them." Lin Yilei's words were very direct. He did not leave any room for negotiation. "Your Majesty, you..." Chen Xiaofeng was very anxious. He wanted to say something, but was stopped by Lin Yilei, who raised his hand and said, "Your Majesty, you don't have to say anything. Let me finish this first." While saying that, his sharp eyes had already turned to Ji Dong. His eyes were like two sharp swords that wanted to pierce through Ji Dong. "Boy, you're the first to steal my Lin family's daughter-in-law," Lin Yilei said coldly. Ji Dong said indifferently, "Emotions can't be forced. If Senior doesn't understand this point, this Junior can teach you." He didn't have a good impression of this supreme being expert in front of him who was obviously speaking ill of him. "Boy, you are very arrogant. You dare to provoke this old man." "Good, very good. Today, even if the Yinyang siblings and Ji Zhangxin couple were here, they would not be able to save you." Lin Yilei's voice became colder and colder. The light around his body was constantly twisting, making people unable to see his original appearance. No matter what was said, although Lin Baichuan and his wife were extremely dissatisfied with Ji Dong, at least they did not speak ill of him. Ji Dong felt guilty in his heart, which was why he had tolerated them again and again. Facing Lin Yilei's angry rebuke, Ji Dong actually calmed down. He would rather face such an opponent. No matter how strong the opponent was, at least he could fight with all his strength. Ji Dong said coldly, "Are you not afraid of the wind cutting your tongue? If my grandmaster and great-grandmaster were here, would you still dare to say such words? If you hit the young, the old would come out. If you hit the old, an even older one would come out. May I ask, do you have a father or a grandfather? If you do, then call them all out. Taking turns to fight is no different from ganging up. It seems that bullying the weak is the tradition of your Lin family." Hearing Ji Dong's words, Lin Yilei could not help but fly into a rage. He took a step forward, and the entire martial arts arena shook violently. His entire body had already charged towards Ji-dong like a bolt of lightning. This old man will bully the weak. I'll first kill you, a vile spawn who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. As soon as the two words vile spawn came out, Ji-dong's expression finally changed. A layer of frost had already enveloped him, and a thick killing intent was released without reservation. In this life, the body that he had inherited was originally an illegitimate child. Lin Alei's insult immediately made Ji-dong's anger rise up. His eyes suddenly opened wide, and a dazzling silver light shot out from his eyes. Facing a 9-crown devil who also had extreme demonic power, the element suppression would not have any effect, but Ji-dong still had the spiritual suppression that was not inferior to that of a martial saint. In fact, Lin Alei and Lin Qing had already heard the noise, but with their status, they naturally would not come out so easily. Later, when they arrived at the martial arts arena, Lin Alei and Lin Qing clearly felt the changes there, so they rushed over in shock and anger. In fact, Lin Alei was not as irritable as he appeared to be. He did it on purpose. Just like what Ji-dong had said, it was obviously extremely humiliating for him to embarrass a junior with his status. He pretended to be angry so that he could have an impulsive explanation later. Therefore, when he heard Ji-dong's sarcasm, he did not dare to give Ji-dong any time to speak and directly launched an attack. The Lin family had suffered such a great humiliation in the imperial palace, and even the family head was almost forced to death. Even if he had offended the 4 supreme masters, he could not care less now. If he did not kill Ji-dong, the Lin family would not have a place in the Dongmu Empire in the future. Lin Xinyu could not marry Qin Xishuan, but he would never let Ji-dong marry her. Therefore, Lin Alei's heart was already full of killing intent. Since he appeared, he had already decided to kill Ji-dong at all costs. The sudden spiritual suppression caused Lin Alei to be in a trance for a moment, but he was a supreme master after all, so he immediately reacted and completely concentrated his spiritual power. Although it was not enough to attack, the self-defense of his soul was able to reduce the effect of Ji-dong's spiritual suppression to the minimum. What a strong spiritual power! Lin Alei was secretly shocked. The suppression of spiritual power not only affected the opponent's fighting spirit, but at the same time, it could also detect the opponent's movements. At this moment, Lin Alei had a feeling that he was completely seen through. A dazzling white light condensed above Lin Alei's head. What made Ji-dong alarmed was that Lin Alei's Yin-Yang Corona was also at level 96, which was the same as Fatty Zhou Xiao Xiao. This was enough to make Ji-dong vigilant. Chapter 470. Suddenly, Ji-dong sensed something, and his body retreated like lightning. At the same time, a huge green light had risen from the position he had occupied before, like a giant wood flying into the air. The giant wood that was condensed by the green light did not stop there. It directly swallowed the air, rolled, and exploded in an instant, turning into thousands of green threads that shot towards Ji-dong. Subduing by force? These words suddenly sounded in Ji-dong's heart. The opponent was clearly using the difference in magic power to suppress him. It should be known that Lin Alei was also using the ultimate magic power, the ultimate first wood. In the case of both sides having the same ultimate magic power, the opponent's magic power was more than 10 levels higher than his. One could imagine the pressure Ji-dong's body was under. Lin Alei had lived for hundreds of years, and his combat experience was extremely rich. At a glance, he could see the strengths and weaknesses of Ji-dong's strength. There was no doubt that Ji-dong's dual attribute ultimate magic power was his biggest advantage. Although he had not released the Yin-Yang crown, Lin Alei could fully understand that Ji-dong's cultivation could not reach the level of 9 crowns. At the same time, when Lin Alei made his move, Ji-dong did not respond. The long roars of Mao Tai and Wu Yangye sounded at the same time. The next moment, their huge bodies had already blocked in front of Ji-dong. Strong black and white light burst from their bodies, and the yin and yang fire in the 5 elements formation appeared simultaneously. Although Lin Alei's attack was fast, when his attack was about to touch the sacred evolution fire dragon, the black and white light had already formed. The two colors of light intertwined in the air, and all the fire elements between heaven and earth suddenly became restless. In front of the sacred evolution fire dragon, there seemed to be a huge whirlpool. The ultimate firstwood magic power that was like silk, and silk entered it and was immediately strangled. None of it could really fall on the body of the sacred evolution fire dragon. Infernal domain. Several low voices sounded at the same time. Yes, what the sacred evolution fire dragon displayed was its Tai Chi infernal domain. Lin Ilay didn't seem to care that his demonic power was being melted. While he was in the air, his palms had already been stacked together. It was the Lin clan's Thousand Leaves palm that Lin Xinyu wanted to perform but didn't manage to. The same demonic skill would have completely different effects when executed by different people. Lin Ilay's Thousand Leaf palm was completed in the blink of an eye. In front of him, there really seemed to be thousands of leaves stacked on top of each other, forming a leaf that was about half a meter long. The jade-like leaf floated into the air and flew toward the sacred flame dragon effortlessly. Although Ji Dong was standing behind the sacred flame dragon, his mental strength was so strong that he could clearly see everything that was happening on the battlefield. When Lin Ilay's Thousand Leaf palm was unleashed, his expression changed. Even with his mental strength, he couldn't catch the trajectory of the Thousand Leaf palm. It seemed to have no pattern to it. It just floated in the air and appeared in front of the Mao Tai and Wu Yangye in the blink of an eye. It was unknown where it would land. Transmigrate. Ji Dong's voice rang out in the hearts of Mao Tai and Wu Yangye. Although they didn't understand why Ji Dong would ask them to do this, they still did as they were told. This was because they had absolute trust in Ji Dong. Ji Dong's voice echoed in Mao Tai and Wu Yangye's hearts. In a flash, the sacred flame dragon disappeared into thin air. When it reappeared, it was already behind Lin Ilay. Its huge body moved instantly, and the sacred flame dragon swung its tail at Lin Ilay's waist again. The sacred evolution fire dragon's attack was so sudden and fierce that Lin Ilay could no longer control his Thousand Leaf palm. His figure flashed, but he didn't release any mana. Instead, he pressed his hands down on the sacred evolution fire dragon's tail that was attacking him. The leaf that had been unleashed by the Thousand Leaf palm was the first to change. Without Lin Ilay's control, it fell to the ground. Suddenly, a low rumble sounded. The people in the distance didn't feel anything, but Ji Dong, who was nearby, gasped. There wasn't a loud sound, but a pitch-black pit had appeared on the ground where the leaf had landed. The appearance of the pit was exactly the same as the energy of the leaf, but it was bottomless. Ji Dong's spiritual power immediately probed inside, and he was shocked to find that the depth was more than 300 meters. Such concentrated demonic power, such a terrifying attack. This was the true power of the Thousand Leaf palm. Ji Dong knew that if he had allowed the Thousand Leaf palm to land on the sacred flame dragon's body, he wouldn't have been able to escape unscathed despite the Mao Tai and Wu Yangye's astonishing defense. The attack of the Thousand Leaf palm was similar to his Deity Destroyer Strike, but his Deity Destroyer Strike injected demonic power into the opponent's body after hitting the target, while the Thousand Leaf palm was released after stacking and condensing demonic power outside the body. The demonic power of this small leaf was already equivalent to the power of a sure kill technique. Everything that Ji Dong sensed was transmitted to the sacred flame dragon's mind, and he warned it to be careful. A supreme being at level 96 was indeed not easy to deal with. At that moment, Lin Ilay's palms were already pressed against the sacred evolution fire dragon's hammertail. A strange scene appeared. As the sacred evolution fire dragon's tail lashed out, Lin Ilay's body seemed to be weightless. He floated through the air like a leaf, drifting away in the same direction as the Thousand Leaf palms he had used earlier. However, Ji Dong could clearly feel that he was the one Lin Ilay was aiming for. He was actually borrowing strength from the sacred flame dragon's tail hammer. This supreme being of the first wood element, Lin Ilay had already assimilated his body with the first wood element to perfection. How could such a person be so hot-tempered? At this moment, Ji Dong understood a lot about Lin Ilay's behavior. Lin Yilei's body floated in the air, borrowing the power of the sacred evolution fire dragon's tail to suddenly accelerate, drawing a beautiful arc in the air. A resonant dragon's roar rang out from his body, and Jidong vaguely saw an azure dragon flying towards him. That dragon's roar wasn't coming from Lin Yilei's mouth, but from the resonance of his mana with the air when he released it. Lin Yilei's whole body was in the air, and his hands had already completed the stacking action in front of him. The most powerful part of his thousand-leaf palm was not its attacking power, but it was similar to what the sacred flame dragon had demonstrated when it used the sun, moon, yin, and yang world. It used the least amount of mana to achieve the greatest effect. His thousand-leaf palm was only equivalent to his standard technique. So how much mana would it consume even if he used 1,000 palms? But when the 1,000 palms were stacked and compressed, the power produced was enough to reach the level of a sure kill technique. With Lin Xinyu's cultivation, he could at most stack 100 palms, but Lin Yilei could truly stack 1,000 palms. Just as he was about to fly in front of Jidong, Lin Yilei's thousand-leaf palm had finished stacking. This time, he did not release the mana, but stuck it on his right palm and pressed it down on Jidong's head. Jidong had the sacred Fire King armor and the Phoenix Dance Dragon Snake transformation. Even so, if he was hit by this palm, his body would explode into pieces in an instant. An expert skill could be seen the moment he made a move. Just from these simple changes, Jidong could tell that among all the supreme experts he had met, only his grandmaster Yin Zhaoyang could compare to him. Or perhaps Zhou Xiaoxiao could use a divine weapon to face him. He was indeed the pillar of the Dongmu Empire. His strength was indeed shocking. Jidong could not dodge. At this moment, if he took even half a step back, his momentum would be gone. When facing an opponent at the level of a supreme expert, once the opponent took the initiative, even with the sacred flame dragon's help, Lin Yilei would only have to pay the price of injuring himself if he wanted to kill Jidong. Therefore, Jidong could not retreat. He definitely could not retreat. With a boom, something seemed to explode around Jidong. It was as if a layer of light had exploded from within his body. His shoulders shrugged, and his entire body suddenly turned into the posture of a cheetah that was ready to pounce. Strangely, his raised hands had already turned gold and black. In the next moment, Jidong moved like lightning. He rushed towards Lin Yilei, choosing to face him head-on. Seeing this scene, Dongmu Emperor Chen Xiaofeng felt his heart tighten. Where did this young man with the title of tyrant come from? He was only in his 20s, but he dared to face a level 96 supreme expert head-on? Jidong's movements were as smooth as flowing water. It looked as if he was rushing forward with an indomitable will. Only Lin Yilei knew that he was not rushing directly towards him. When Jidong's body exploded, Lin Yilei had already prepared to exert his strength, but he suddenly discovered that Jidong, who was already in front of him, had instantly retreated half a foot. Although half a foot was not a long distance, to an expert like him, half a foot more or less, the effect of exerting force would definitely be different. Therefore, he could only pause the 1,000 leaves palm energy that he was preparing to release, and at this moment, Jidong rushed forward again. Coincidentally, at the moment when Lin Yilei had just retracted his force, the profound degree of grasping this opportunity made Lin Yilei's heart involuntarily suck in a breath of cold air. What kind of combat experience was required to be able to play such a trick in the face of his sure kill attack? Lin Yilei was very depressed. Even if it was another supreme expert, it would be impossible for him to do what Jidong had just done in front of him. The reason why Jidong could control Lin Yilei's momentum at will and use his speed to maximize his attack was because his spiritual power was far above Lin Yilei's. Therefore, Lin Yilei was unable to lock onto him, but he could clearly grasp the magic power conversion between the attack and defense of Lin Yilei. Jidong used his left hand, a left hand that was as black as ink. When his left hand collided with Lin Yilei's right palm, something unexpected happened. There was no violent explosion. The moment the two palms collided, there was actually a violent friction sound. That's right, friction. Lin Yilei's 1,000-leaf palm was a combination technique of 1,000 palms in one, and what Jidong used was the Dark Flame Devil King's sure kill technique, Dark Kiss of Annihilation. In terms of level, Dark Kiss of Annihilation was definitely inferior to the Thousand-Leaf Palm. The Thousand-Leaf Palm was 1,000 palms superimposed, while Dark Kiss of Annihilation was 1,000 Dark Moon claws, which produced a continuous superimposed effect on the opponent's body. However, using Dark Kiss of Annihilation to deal with the Thousand-Leaf Palm was an excellent choice. Ji Dong relied on his superior spiritual power to control his opponent's movements and seize the initiative by moving his body. This allowed his Dark Kiss of Annihilation to land on Lin Yilei's palm at the first moment, and it was also when Lin Yilei hadn't exerted any force. The Thousand Claw of Annihilation was executed in one go. Every Dark Moon claw seemed to be stripping away the superimposed power of the Thousand-Leaf Palm. When the 1,000 claws flashed past, Lin Yilei was shocked to discover that the mana accumulated in his Thousand-Leaf Palm had actually been reduced by half. However, at this time, the power of his palm had completely burst out. With the support of the Thousand-Leaf Palm's huge magic fusion, the stiffening effect of Dark Kiss of Annihilation couldn't be used at all, and the palm was about to land. And at this time, Ji Dong's right hand moved. His left hand was a claw, and his right was a fist. What he used was the Flame Monarch's Sure Kill technique, Monarch's Devour, that was used to counter the Dark Flame Devil King's Dark Kiss of Annihilation. 1,000 Sunburn Devours superimposed together was the Monarch's Devour. This time, it was a true magnetic bombardment. What the spectators could see from afar was a glaring golden light and a glaring emerald light exploding at the same time. Terrifying mana fluctuations surged into the sky, and in the next moment, Ji Dong's body was sent flying from the collision of the light. He landed a few dozen meters away and only managed to stabilize himself after taking a few steps back. However, Lin Yilei's palm was still blocked in the end. Lin Yilei's feet were firmly on the ground, and his gaze towards Ji Dong became even more murderous. At this moment, the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon had already retracted its wings and descended from the sky, landing beside Ji Dong. Lin Yilei was extremely shocked. He had already tested that Ji Dong's mana was far inferior to his, but he was still able to block his attack when he used the Thousand-Leaf Palm. In terms of control of mana, especially the application of dual attribute mana, Lin Yilei was actually helpless. Although he had forced Ji Dong back with his palm, he hadn't really hurt Ji Dong. Moreover, Ji Dong's attack had forced Lin Yilei to divert his attention to dispel the dual attribute mana, so he couldn't chase after him. Although it couldn't be said that Ji Dong already had the ability to challenge a supreme being, he wasn't far from it. If Lin Yilei didn't kill him today, it would be even more difficult to deal with him the next time they met. Chapter 471. How could Ji Dong not know about Lin Yilei's killing intent? The clash just now had given him a deeper understanding of this great sage. The dark red Godfire Saint armor appeared and covered Ji Dong's body. When the sinister mask covered his face, an unparalleled aura of slaughter was released from his body without restraint. This was the killing intent that belonged to the god of slaughter, Shupness. The god of slaughter's body in the fire god sword would affect Ji Dong's usage, but Ji Dong could also borrow some of his abilities. Ji Dong's aura rose terrifyingly. Even the Sacred Evolution Fire Dragon sensed the change in his aura and roared at the sky. Chen Xishuan watched the battle nervously. When Ji Dong's killing intent erupted without restraint, she understood that Ji Dong had become serious. This was likely to be a battle to the death. She knew that her judgment before returning was completely wrong. The Lin family had done this for the sake of face and other reasons. Not only had Lin Baichuan made a move, even a chosen like Lin Yilei had disregarded his face and attacked Hyoheim. It would be very difficult for today's matter to end peacefully. However, Chen Xishuan wasn't too worried. She had absolute confidence in Ji Dong. Furthermore, she was here. With their combined strength, they would be able to escape unscathed even if they were to face the two honorable state experts in front of them. The change in Ji Dong's temperament also caused Lin Yilei's gaze to turn serious. Two sharp gazes met Ji Dong's dense killing intent. At the same time, Lin Yilei took a step forward and a dense magical ripple burst forth. A layer of black air current swept out from his body. It was a black light mixed with an azure light. When this light appeared on the field, the pressure immediately became even more intense. The azure-black light floated in the air like a dense fog. Jidong was shocked to find that the soul force he had sent out to sense the changes in the surroundings had been forced back into his body. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation. Even when he faced the Dragon Emperor and the Earth Dragon Ancestor, their soul force surpassed his, but they were unable to force his soul force back into his body. Furthermore, from the previous battle, he could tell that Lin Yilei's soul cultivation was inferior to his. Why was this happening? Devil Domain. These two words flashed across Ji Dong's mind. At the same time, he became more vigilant. Not only was his soul suppressed, but everything around him was no longer clear, as if the whole world had fallen into darkness. Lin Yilei said coldly, "You didn't expect this, did you? Is your soul force useless? It doesn't matter if I tell you. This is my devil domain, a spiritual devil domain called soul suppressing. It's your honor to die in my soul suppressing devil domain. In my soul suppressing devil domain, no matter who it is, even if it's a saint-level expert, they will be affected. All their reactions will become sluggish, and their spiritual power will not be able to detect anything around them. It's as if they have lost their sixth senses. You can hear my voice now, but I deliberately let you hear it. You can't feel my location, and your sixth senses have been sealed. In the devil domain of the supreme level, my soul-suppressing devil domain is one of the strongest. You should be proud to be able to force me to use my devil domain." Lin Yilei's words were not exaggerated. Jidong had already understood that his devil domain on the spiritual level was completely different from those devil domains that mainly used demonic power to activate the power of heaven and earth. This soul-suppressing devil domain itself had no attack power, but its function was to shield people's sixth senses. Without the sixth senses, how could he compete with the opponent? Unless he could immediately break through this devil domain, he would only be at the mercy of others. However, at the same time, Jidong also judged that the soul-suppressing devil domain was indeed astonishing. But in order to use such a powerful devil domain, Lin Yilei would definitely have to pay a certain price. Otherwise, he would not have wasted time talking to him, and would have killed him long ago. What should I do? Jidong's confidence was finally shaken. He was not afraid of a head-on confrontation, but this kind of situation where he could only be at the mercy of his opponent after losing all his senses was not something he could grasp. With Lin Yilei's cultivation, as long as he maintained the devil domain and launched an attack, his thousand-leaf palm would be enough to injure him and the sacred evolution fire dragon. At this moment, an extremely familiar and somewhat anxious aura suddenly invaded Jidong's heart. Before he could react, the darkness in front of him suddenly lit up, and what he saw was a red light. Jidong did not think that this red light was coming to attack him, because this red light seemed to be released from his own body. Seeing it, Jidong could not help but be greatly surprised. From his own feelings and Lin Yilei's words just now, he understood that in this soul-sealing demon domain, all colors and light were completely blocked. Why would a red light suddenly rise up? And the place where the red light rose up seemed to be from his right wrist. Before Jidong could think too much about it, the rising red light had already quickly condensed into a red eye. It was a beautiful, large eye that was bright and full of expression. Even though it was completely condensed from light, it still looked so lifelike. A miraculous scene appeared. A red light shot out from the red eye, spreading in front of him in the shape of a fan. Following that, the familiar feeling from before merged with Jidong, and all the senses he had lost were completely restored when he was within the range of the red light. The huge red eye floated up and landed behind Jidong, as if it had become his background. In the next moment, tens of thousands of red lights shot out, completely illuminating the dark world of the soul-sealing demon domain. No, this is impossible. At a glance, Jidong saw Lin Yilei, who was standing there and constantly releasing the infernal domain with his hands. This cry of shock also came from his mouth. Jidong ignored him. Instead, he lowered his head and looked at the vermilion bird bracelet on his right wrist that was shining elegantly. He called out emotionally, "Horror, is that you?" As Ji-dong called out, a loud phoenix cry rang out. Following that, a fiery red figure shot up from the vermilion bird bracelet on Ji-dong's wrist. The red eye that had been behind Ji-dong also rose up, floating behind it and rising along with it. There was a shattering sound, and all the darkness shattered in the next moment, turning into greenish-black air currents that dissipated into the air. Everything returned to normal, but there was now a strange large bird in the sky. This bird was about 5 meters long, but its wingspan was 10 meters. The most amazing part was the dazzling tail feathers on its back that were more than 15 meters long. It had the head of a chicken, the neck of a swallow, the claws of an eagle, the tail of a fish, the back of a turtle, and the feathers of a peacock. Its feathers were black and gold. The feathers on its back, head, and tail were all gold, while the feathers on its abdomen, the bottom of its wings, and its claws were all black. Yes, it was Hua, the eclipse phoenix Hua, who had been in a deep slumber in the vermilion bird bracelet for a very long time. The main reason for its slumber was the appearance of the sacred evolution fire dragon. The sacred evolution fire dragon's strength had aroused Hua-er's arrogance. Hence, Hua-er did not appear easily and had been bitterly cultivating in seclusion in the vermilion bird bracelet. Ji-dong's connection with Hua was no less than that of the sacred evolution fire dragon. As Ji-dong's strength increased, so did Hua-er's cultivation. At this moment, Ji-dong saw that Hua-er's body had already become so huge and beautiful that he almost couldn't recognize it. Judging from its magical aura, Hua had also risen to the 9th rank. If its mother was the fire phoenix, then Hua-er was the yin-yang twin fire phoenix. When it flew out of the vermilion bird bracelet this time, it seemed to have been reborn. Even the sacred evolution fire dragon could not conceal its brilliance. Loud and clear phoenix cries continuously rang out from its mouth. The sacred evolution fire dragon, standing behind Ji-dong, didn't want to be outdone. It suddenly stomped on the ground with its 9 powerful claws and soared into the sky. It circled around the eclipse phoenix and Hua-er, creating a magnificent scene of a dragon and phoenix crying in harmony. The huge red eye gradually disappeared from Hua-er's back. Hua-er's arrogant eyes looked down at Linalei with a hint of disdain. Ji-dong's confusion and hesitation woke Hua-er from its slumber. The eye formed by the red light was one of Hua-er's innate skills, Eyes of the Phoenix. The Eyes of the Phoenix, also known as the Eye of Truth, was a unique innate skill of the vermilion bird's bloodline. It could break through all illusionary spiritual attacks and see through all camouflage. If Lin Yilei's soul-suppressing demon territory was the nemesis of Ji-dong's saint-rank soul, then Hua-er's Eye of the Phoenix was undoubtedly the nemesis of Lin Yilei's soul-suppressing demon territory. This proved the saying that all things in the world reinforce and subdue each other. Linalei was also a little stunned. He only came back to his senses after a long while. The way he looked at Ji-dong changed a little. He said, "Two contracted magical beasts of the same attribute." When the sacred evolution fire dragon appeared, no one doubted that it was not Ji-dong's contracted magical beast. Not to mention the tacit cooperation between the man and the 2 dragons. Their identical attributes were enough to prove their relationship. People with dual fire attributes were rare, and so were magical beasts with dual fire attributes. Given Ji-dong's special attributes, Lin Yilei was most afraid that he could find a magical beast of the same attribute as his partner. God knows what kind of power they would have when they grew to a higher level. Therefore, he decided to kill the man and the dragon, making sure that they would not be able to live here. However, at this moment, another magical beast had appeared on Ji-dong's body. Furthermore, its cultivation was not inferior to that of the 2-headed dragon from before. It even had the eyes of truth that could break through his soul-suppressing demon territory. It was a phoenix, a mutated phoenix. Heavens, it was another magical beast of the same attribute as him. The whole place was silent. Everyone was in disbelief as they looked at the dragon and phoenix circling in the sky. Until now, Ji-dong had not released his yin-yang crown even when he was facing Lin Yilei. However, He had blocked Lin Ilei's attack, and he even had the cooperation of two powerful magical beast companions. The expression in Lin Ilei's eyes gradually changed. When he had first fought with Ji Dong, he had not regarded Ji Dong as an opponent on the same level as him. He had only wanted to finish off this young man in the shortest time possible so that he could save his family's face. However, after the appearance of the Eclipse Phoenix, Lin Ilei understood that the young man in front of him was already an opponent on the same level as him. Hua Er's eyes of the Phoenix had completely restrained Lin Ilei's soul-suppressing demon territory, causing his own strength to be significantly weakened. The soul-suppressing demon territory was an extremely powerful demon territory. In the circle of sovereign powerhouses, no one was willing to go up against Lin Ilei's demon territory. They were also well aware of how powerful it was. However, this spiritual-type demon territory also had its shortcomings. Firstly, it required a large amount of Lin Ilei's soul-suppressing demon territory to release. It was much more exhausting than an ordinary demon master's demon territory. Secondly, once the soul-suppressing demon territory met its nemesis, it would not be able to display any of its power. Lin Ilei took a deep breath and waved his hands in the air. He shouted in a low voice, "Gates of hell that protect my life, open." In an instant, the greenish-black color that had appeared when he released the soul-suppressing demon territory was released from his body once again. However, this time, it was not released in the form of demon force. Instead, his body was completely dyed greenish-black. A huge pattern with a diameter of 10 meters appeared in front of Lin Ilei. The pattern looked very strange. There were countless symbols of formations on it. Looking at this huge formation, Ji Dong could even find some traces of a 5-elements formation. Moreover, the demon force released from this formation was extremely strange. It was so strange that he could not distinguish it. In the next moment, the ground suddenly trembled. The entire Easternwood city trembled slightly. The black formation with a diameter of 10 meters fluctuated violently, and a small sapling drilled out from the center. The sapling was completely black. As soon as it broke out of the ground, it immediately grew rapidly. Almost in the blink of an eye, it had become a towering tree that was 30 meters tall. This giant tree was completely black. Only the leaves were green. However, the veins on the leaves were also black. Strong demon force, mixed with incredible fear, quickly spread out. This strange giant tree also had a special characteristic, and that was that all of its branches were especially slender. They hung down from the towering giant tree to the ground, and even spread out from the ground to the surroundings.